Oh, it would help if I started my YouTube. Okay, let me try this again. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome one and all to yet another episode of WhickTV, a cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. We've had a slew of Supreme Court rulings that are, let's say, controversial come through of late. So I figured I'd bring this topic up again. Is the Supreme Court serving our interests? If it is, how can we help it serve it better? And if it's not, is it maybe time for the Supreme Court to go? There's been several possibilities put forward, whether it be expanding the courts, abolishing the court, or to have some sort of term limits on Supreme Court justices, a wide variety of fixes, quote unquote, what we have now. But is that wise? We're going to discuss that today, and I've gathered together a Supreme panel to do that. And we're going to start today with 𝕲𝖎, and then we'll just kind of go around. So 𝕲𝖎, 𝖓, then yeah, go around. 𝕲𝖎, what do you got? Opening statement. Go.
So, as a framing device, the Supreme Court is supposed to be an anti-majoritarian institution. This is the theoretical justification for it, that the only reason you need it is to protect the rights of citizens who would not be protected if democracy had its way. If the will of the majority, if the tyranny of the masses had its way, then people might take away people's rights. And yet, we are seeing that the Supreme Court is so clearly both, one, politicized, meaning that it's not serving this rights-protecting goal, but rather advancing a political agenda, and two, actually stripping some of those rights, that it's not fulfilling this goal. So the argument that I have long given is that the things you should be interested in are keeping a well-functioning democracy and having, yes, a lot of countries have like a highest court, which is set up there to interpret the law. But if the Supreme Court is destroying people's rights, it is actually doing the opposite of the only benefit that it's supposed to have. In a democracy, there's no reason to have a council of unelected elders decide what the truth is. I don't care what the founders said. They're dead. They don't know what the truth is. I care about what's real and what's good for people. And the Supreme Court, it does not. As like an institution, there's no reason to believe that it is better than a well-functioning parliamentary system or a well-functioning Congress. So ideally, it shouldn't exist.
Well, with that, we'll get into it as we go. I'm sure we'll have some contention here. 𝕲𝖎, hit us up.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
You're good. Go ahead.
All right. Yeah, destroying the Supreme Court is fucking stupid. Absolutely, without question. I think it's interesting how we're kind of seeing in real time the claims be rolled back from abolish the Supreme Court to, yeah, I guess we're going to need a high court, but, abolish the Supreme Court as it is now. And then, maybe next we'll hear, it'll return, like revert to packing, and we'll see where it goes. But the concept of a court is critically important, right? If you believe in constitutional protections, whether it be for a minority or a majority, there needs to be a government body there to figure out and interpret how these constitutional protections apply. Individuals have rights in a system, and those rights are not up for debate. They're not up for voting. Even in a system in which or even in a country where maybe there's some areas where people are discriminated against unjustly, well, the constitutional protections apply to those as well. I agree that the Supreme Court is somewhat an anti-majoritarian institution, but if you see the Supreme Court stripping away rights, I think this is fundamentally the wrong way of viewing what they're doing. Right? You can just as easily say, well, the Supreme Court is actually defending rights in the sense of, well, if you don't, we're not going to force some isolated website designer to make something they don't want to make, force them to labor when they don't want to. We're not going to, allow government institutions to discriminate based on race and discriminate against minorities such as Asians. I think the whole concept of abolishing the court is stupid. Packing the court's not quite as stupid, but it's also stupid because what's going to happen is every single election you're going to have a back and forth where the court's just going to get infinitely big. In fact, I would be in favor of a constitutional protection that would limit the amount of justices to 9.
Okay, thank you. Prime Kai, what do you got for us? You're muted, buddy.
I I need to keep you on your toes, Wig, right? As a moderator. Okay, great. There you go. Okay. You passed the test. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That web designer wasn't really a web designer. She said that she had a gay couple ask her to design a site, and she put a number within the text of her suit. And someone actually bothered to call that number, and it turns out that person wasn't gay; he was straight. He was a web designer himself, and he had no idea about the case. She was a complete liar, and the Supreme Court ignored that. So keep that in mind. But beyond that, I agree with my friend Lactoid that we need a court for some level of checks and balances. But I don't know if it's this specific mixture, right? I think it's maybe people have long said that the court is the most powerful branch. It's unchecked, really. The people will say, well, the president gets to nominate them. Yeah, but once they're in, and they can just do whatever. So I am for keeping the court because I think we need some sort of institution similar to it, but putting in some other check on their power, I think, is absolutely crucial.
I guess we'll get into exactly what that is because I'm curious as we go. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate you, Prime, even though you keep me on my toes. 𝕾𝖍𝖎, please.
Hello. I believe, okay, I'm not muted. Yeah, so I have a feeling that I'm probably going to be fighting against people on both sides here, except for you, Prime. You're like you gave like the only, I guess, reasonable-ish take. I don't think we should abolish the Supreme Court. I think that's fucking stupid. But we also shouldn't pack it. If you want to reform it, term limits are a good idea. The Supreme Court is important. It's important to have a court that interprets the law. But I think one of the problems here that maybe a lot of people ignore is that there are certain issues, like even just with the law of the land in America, like in the Constitution, for example, you want to talk about like there's nothing there. There's no like real equal rights amendment. Yeah, the 14th Amendment says that you are not equal under the law, or that you can't discriminate, like everyone's equal under the law. But that's not the same thing as saying that like you can't discriminate against people like based on, you know, like the web designer case. And Prime, you kind of stole my thunder a little bit because I was going to mention that case was like bullshit. And yeah, like it's not, I feel like if the actual conversation we should be having here is what kind of laws can we pass, or could we amend the Constitution to change things in order to be able to further people's rights, instead of let's abolish the Supreme Court or let's pack the Supreme Court, ignoring the fact that the Supreme Court has done a lot of good, but it sucks that it had to do that good and that they couldn't just pass a law to make Roe v. Wade better, or like to make Roe v. Wade like a thing like in the law, instead of having it be like the law of the land via the Supreme Court. And the reason why they made it the law of the land, you know, the right to privacy, like that's very stupid. They should have done it a different way, because that didn't hold up, as we all ended up seeing. So yeah, I feel like everyone is kind of missing that, and they're going for like ridiculous, like let's abolish the Supreme Court. Like that's not going to happen. Anyway, yeah.
Well, thanks for being here, and I'm sure we'll get into it as we go. Appreciate you. Omni, hit us.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I don't know if we could. I noticed I got a lot of hate in the last panel that I was on. But yeah, those people are gonna have to deal with it. Because I'm gonna keep coming back on. All right. But anyways, on to the Supreme Court. In my opinion, the SCOTUS is a pretty fucked institution in many ways. It's become extremely political and partisan, which it wasn't really intended to be originally. It has a lot of power over the other two branches, but almost no checks against it from them. And this is a problem. And on top of all this, these guys are allowed to receive all kinds of gifts from wealthy donors without any real legal repercussions. And a lot of times they don't even disclose it either. And they also deliberate in complete secrecy when they want to, away from the press. The whole lifetime appointment thing might have been okay at a time in history when everybody was dying at age 40, but we don't really live in those times anymore, do we? People are living a lot longer, so I think we could probably revisit the whole lifetime appointment thing, to be honest. So for all those reasons, I think we need to nerf the Supreme Court if we're using video game terms, and nerf it pretty hard. Omni_slap1 on Twitch and Twitter.
Okay, well, thank you, and I'm sure we'll see what the patch notes say after we're done deliberating here. Okay, last but certainly not least, 𝕵𝖎𝖙, what you got for us?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm hearing a lot of, well, at least SDL's biting the bullet on the I want the Supreme Court gone. Though people from their side of the aisle are also really up in arms about a certain Supreme Court case about state legislatures being able to overrule the judiciary in their states in order to gerrymander as much as they want. And all of a sudden, the court becomes very important in those cases, but apparently it's not important on the federal level. One thing that he mentioned that I think should be touched on is he said it doesn't do any, it wouldn't be necessary in a well-functioning parliamentary system, or at least it doesn't offer an improvement upon a well-functioning parliamentary system. My question is, without the Supreme Court, who ensures that the parliamentary system is well-functioning? That's the reason we have the Supreme Court, is to make sure that everything the legislature does is legal according to our Constitution, and is functioning well. In a well-functioning society, we wouldn't need courts at all because everybody would just be functioning well and there would be no need for them. But we don't live in a well-functioning society, and we live in a society that has the potential for the parliamentary or congressional system to function poorly, and we need a judicial branch to check that power. As far as people saying we don't have enough checks on judicial power, there's a reason why no one's able to really bring up a specific one that they want implemented, because it's a pretty powerful one to say that the executive branch nominates, the legislative branch confirms. The issue for them isn't that the other branches don't have checks on the judicial system. It's that their side of the other branches don't have significant checks on the judicial system. They actually have to reach across the aisle and get a majority to oppose a nominee. And that's really difficult because a lot of these nominees are very credentialed. They're good nominees. They do their job well, and their job is to interpret the Constitution and to preserve what's in there and to allow states to experiment with what's not. And that's what they're doing. And you said, for those who like the Supreme Court, how can we make sure they continue doing well and do even better in the future? Get more justices that have originalist interpretations of the Constitution and protect what's in there, and let states experiment with what's not.
Okay, and with that, we'll open it up. If you have trouble getting
Originalism is bullshit. So
Why?
like, understand that.
Why?
It's literally whatever they want, right? We see this over and over again, where the Supreme Court says that, or a justice says that they're originalists, and they just have a strict reading Constitution, but then they don't actually do that. But whatever, that's fine.
When?
But like, so you're talking about like, I think you were touching on something that was interesting, and that it's about the other side, right? Like the other side feels that that they're losing, right? At some point, everyone is on the receiving end of a bad case, and then they say, "Well, these are activist judges," right? And both sides do that, and then that's when they complain. And I agree, that's like nonsense. I've been doing this long enough to understand that, but that doesn't invalidate the need for more controls.
Like what?
Yeah. So maybe an easier way to eject justices, that might be a control, or like a way to overrule the courts, right? Like, let's say, we have like just like how we have like a higher threshold to overcome a filibuster,
Or a
right? Let's say we'll take 75.
Yeah. We have a system to do that. Your constitutional amendment, right? You amend the Constitution.
Incredibly high burden.
Yeah,
yes, you're right. Like, no,
there's a higher burden to amending the Constitution is a higher burden.
I understand it's a higher
the Supreme Court.
No. I understand it's a higher burden.
SDL.
Right. I understand it's a higher burden. Yeah, that's a good point. First of all, but also I understand it's a higher burden, Prime. But you just said like 75% overcoming a filibuster. Like there'd be some kind of process in place that yes, it would have to be more than just a simple majority to actually overrule the Supreme Court. We have that process in place.
Dude, I hear you. You're correct. That is there, right? And you can overrule the Supreme Court with that method. That is true. What I'm saying is that the controls that we have in place are ineffective because the bar to reach them is just way too high. So yes, you can do a constitutional amendment, but we haven't passed one in decades, as far as I remember, right? We haven't done that in decades. It's really fucking difficult, and because it's so difficult, it's ineffective for the things that we need it for.
Well, wait, real quick. Under democracy, I'm not sure you'd be able to do that anyway, because most of America is approving of these Supreme Court decisions, first of all. My other
So,
thing I wanted to say.
Not abortion.
What does that have to do with what I
maybe
just
not
said?
maybe not the abortion one, but the last
Yeah, but I'm
three
not
ones
talking about
over
any
the past
specific
couple weeks.
case.
Okay.
I'm not talking about any
Oh,
specific
okay, well,
case.
I'm going to
Like,
ask a question about a specific case in a second. Because what I want to
Concisely,
ask
because
is,
we got a lot of people.
yeah,
who wanna
I know,
talk,
I know.
So, yeah.
So I'm hearing constantly, and this is said, like you guys, there's too much politics in the court, right? But I think it's rich coming from from people who reject originalism, because originalism, the whole point of that is rejecting politics from the court. Let me ask you.
How can there not be politics?
Let me ask you a question. I can do it. Can any of you on the other side name me a single case in which you did not like the political outcome, but you thought it was legally well reasoned and you agreed with the legal procedure? Just one.
a single case that I didn't agree with the political outcome, but still I thought it was well reasoned.
Yeah, well, like legally it was correct, because I can think of multiple, like where I don't like the political politics of it, but legally it was correct.
I'll say Dobbs because I thought the right to privacy thing was dumb, and I don't think that's a good way to defend abortion.
Okay, you're not really on the other side though. Like I'm asking,
but like
you're more reasonable for sure.
I mean, I disagree with you hard about that gay or about that web designer thing, and I'm sure you and I disagree about what kind of shit we think should be in the Constitution. But
sure, right, but as long as you have principle,
originalism is dumb.
Well, hold on. As long as you're principled and that you point to Dobbs as like, yeah, I actually hate the politics, but legally they were right. That's very honest of you. But the people who are complaining about politics in the court, for some reason, they can't name a single case.
Okay, you know what? Actually, I will bite the bullet, and I will say that legally, I do think that like they're not necessarily wrong about certain things. Like, I think that the the web design case, the 303 creative case, like, I think that case was dumb because it should never have been heard in the first place because it was based on false pretenses.
That's
that lady
not
never
true.
had. Yes, it is true. That
No,
lady
I just
never
looked it up.
had
That was
a
false.
fucking. Oh, really? Where?
Yep,
Where does it
yep.
say that it was false?
AP News. So the court filings were actually made before the supposed person made this request. She got the request. There's proof of that. Now, it could have been a troll like request.
Yeah, but it wasn't a real
she did, and she did.
request.
Right, it could have been a troll request, but she received it, and her Supreme Court filings did not rely on that request whatsoever.
Yeah, they did. It was in there.
No, they didn't.
Okay.
It was briefly mentioned that she received one, which she did.
I don't mind talking about, just real quick, I don't mind talking about this specific case. It's fine. It's just I don't want it to devolve into just a specific case, right?
Right, but they can't answer a single case that they don't agree with.
Let's
they
give
don't
them a
agree
chance.
with politics.
Let's give them a chance. Let's give them a chance. Let's let SDL have a chance. A court case you thought was well legally reasoned, but you thought it was dumb anyway. Like it was legally reasoned well, but still wrong.
The affirmative action one was well legally reasoned.
I don't know. I want to hear from Sock.
What I was going to say is that the affirmative action case clearly proceeds from like a view that affirmative action violates the Equal Protections Clause. That's a fair like legal understanding. But the whole problem here is that what is legal is not the same thing as what is good. Again, we're all coming supposedly from the perspective that the purpose of the Supreme Court is protecting people's rights. And I want to remind y'all, the Supreme Court presided over a country that kept 4 million people in slavery. It kept 10 million people in segregation. It is not this like bulwark against disenfranchising half the population from voting. It's not this bulwark of freedom by necessity. It only is because right now democracy has forced it to be. We put justices on there that protect our rights. It's not this.
You just admitted you want politics in the court.
Hold on.
It's inevitable. Yeah.
There is
Leptoid,
do you think
that there's never been a non-political court, right? That's
Leptoid, do you think that Brown v. Board? Do you think Brown v. Board of Education was political?
So let me explain. When I'm talking about like a non-political court, what I'm talking about is
I know what you're talking about.
No, but this is important. This is important. I understand there was political ramifications for it, but a non-political court, or the least political court necessary, which is what I'm aiming for, like to minimize how political the court is a court that's making their decisions based on legal interpretation, not based on what is best for society or what they want, like some kind of result that they want. So, for example, like recently when the Supreme Court ruled in McGirt versus Oklahoma that like basically half the state now belongs to an ethno-state, I politically hated that. Absolutely disgusting, horrible outcome. But legally, they were right. Like Gorsuch was right in all of his legal arguments, and I accept that's the legal ruling because I don't want to put politics in the court. I'm actually like a principled, like legal. Like there should be a principled legal process here, and this court has been the most principled court in a very long time.
Because listen, you guys, everybody wants to spam about like like Clarence Thomas did things that are bad, right? I think Lactoid and I would agree. He should have disclosed a lot of these gifts. He should have done that, right? This was a 6-3 decision. Without him, it's a 5-3 decision. Take another one out. It's a 4-3 decision. They got walloped because
4-3, and then liberal justices get in. You can't split
because
the math doesn't work.
No, what I'm saying is
if they had
it was a well legally reasoned argument. And if you want to say the Supreme Court is hyper political, hyper far right, why have they not just gone and overturned U.S. versus Miller, right? The basis of almost every gun control legislation in the United States and the ability for states to enact it came from U.S. versus Miller. That's my favorite case to recommend. I hate what it did to this country, but it was so well legally reasoned, it got a unanimous verdict, even though I think 6 of the justices were part of a majority opinion that said that they don't like what it does to the United States, but it was legally justified and they had to argue it. That's the reason why you get the same gun 3 inches shorter, all of a sudden it's a federal crime to own. But it exists. But this Supreme Court really wanted to just be super aggressive. Do you think there aren't court cases for them to pick up that would overturn U.S. versus Miller? There's thousands every month that use U.S. versus Miller as their precedent, and they haven't overturned it. Because this is the least political court. They do just have an original.
Sure, that's complete bullshit. But I do want to answer. I never got a chance. Hold on, I'm ignoring you for a second because I'm talking Lactoid. Lactoid, you asked me a question, but I didn't get a chance to answer it.
Yeah.
So I don't know the name of the case, so I do apologize. But it's one that they just finished in the current docket. It was people from overseas suing YouTube and Twitter in a separate case. I think these were 2 separate cases for anti-terrorism charges. Basically, there was, you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, there were messages, there were videos on YouTube, right, by like terrorist organizations, and the Supreme Court protected them from like a lawsuit from those families. Because they were saying, well, this was up and this was promoting terrorism. Now, I'm not a free speech absolutist. So like I'm fine with these companies being sued. But in terms of actual like the pragmatism of it all, right? Like then we effectively don't have an internet where we can like post or users can post if like the companies are required to look at every single video and make sure that there's no implications for terrorism. So I disagree with it politically because again, not a free speech absolutist, but I understand for it pragmatically, and I feel like it was well ruled.
So can you say like in that particular case, politically, you'd be okay with YouTube like losing money and having to pay judgments because there was people who uploaded videos onto their platform? Like that's protected by Section 230, right?
Yeah, it's protected by Section 230. So it's not necessarily like I don't care about the specific of this case, right? It's about like whether free speech be absolute, and I'm fine with like limiting hate speech. So like whether YouTube gets fined or not, it's immaterial to me. But like I'm perfectly fine with limiting hate speech, but in this case, that didn't happen.
Yeah, but I don't think this case like made a finding that like there's like free speech absolutism here. What I'm trying to ask is like, because it seems to me that the people who are like right now most angry about like politics in the court, like when you ask them like, name me a case in which like the political outcome that came from this case like doesn't match up with the legal justification to an extent that you want the case to be in place, even though it actually led to a bad outcome. Like I don't know if that happened here.
Hold on, but did you?
Okay, I don't want to get
Can
lost.
I answer your question? Okay,
this is gonna be like semantics back and forth forever.
I'll need to read the case, I guess.
Yeah. I kind of want to needle a little bit because I keep hearing it's bullshit. The court is political. You made an argument against it. That argument's bullshit. I'm not hearing reasons why. Why, if this court is just hyper political and wanting to get all the agenda of the hard right done, one of the only non-culture related political issues for the right wing right now is gun control. Why have they not taken a case to overturn U.S. versus Miller?
Because if they take extremely unpopular positions,
maybe they have other shit going on. Like
why they protect trans people?
if they take extremely unpopular positions, then it hurts them at the polls. You saw that with the Roe versus Wade overturn, right?
Why does it matter? They have lifetime appointments. Their power is impugnable.
Because they're Republicans. They care about the broader political project. If I think that it's a political goal, then their goal as partisans is not just like win one Supreme Court term, it's to win everything.
Then what happened with Roe v. Wade, right? You said that was an unpopular decision. It materially hurt Republicans in the polls. It's largely what's credited for winning Democrats in midterms. Why did they do that then?
Because it's political, but they're not insane. Why don't Republican states pass every single right-wing law all at once?
Because they don't have the legislative power to do it, because some Republicans disagree with them.
Or maybe it's just because of literally time constraints, like the other guy was mentioning. The legislative sessions are literally only so long.
These guys, the Supreme Court has the time, right? They've legislated on smaller issues, or not legislated, sorry, they decided upon smaller issues over and over and over and over again. Why would they not take U.S. versus Miller and overturn it? They did it with Roe v. Wade, even though it was unpopular, even though it hurt Republicans in the polls, got Democrats elected. You're saying the reason they wouldn't do it to Miller is because of all three of those things. They've already proved you wrong with overturning Roe v. Wade and Casey. Why are they not doing it with U.S. versus Miller?
So let's do an example. Obamacare, right? The passage of Obamacare was enormously unpopular for Democrats. They were able to get one big thing done legislatively. You can imagine a very similar theory for how the Supreme Court works. You can only do so many massively unpopular decisions every so often, or else you will face insane backlash.
It doesn't. You guys are the ones saying backlash doesn't matter.
I want to
never get removed.
I want to just real quick. I want to kind of recenter the conversation just a little bit, right? We can quibble about various decisions and various types of courts, but I want to tackle the question of why have a Supreme Court at all, right? Given that there are other countries who have different systems, they're not going down in flames for the most part, right? Why do we need a Supreme Court? Why can't we have something more similar to, Britain's system or something like that? I don't know.
But Britain has a court system.
Yeah, they had.
Yeah,
the distinction here
they don't have a Supreme Court in the exact way that we have one, because they don't have a constitution in the exact way that we have it.
One thing I think they do right, their Supreme Court does not have the power of judicial review, which ours does. Maybe we should go because we were actually like that originally. I don't know if you guys know, but there was the Marbury v. Madison 1803. That's when they even got that power of judicial review. Didn't have it before that. So honestly, I might have to disagree about the originalism thing. I might be an originalist in that because maybe we should go back to that. To be honest.
Also,
wait. You don't want judicial review. You don't want the Supreme Court to be able to strike down statutes that violate people's rights.
Well, in the very least, I think it should be a lot harder for them to do. They can't just pick any legislation that they wanted to review.
They does not believe in gay marriage, Lactoy.
That's
exactly what they did to pass it.
Well, they can't pick up any legislation that they want because they have to someone has to bring a case to them. So it's a reactive body, rather than a proactive body. But I don't. The idea of judicial review, I would have a hard time defending removing that completely. I don't know how we do this without that. I think it's been very
every good case you like is because of judicial review.
Exactly.
So you know. Okay.
I just don't see
so
how
the
I can do
bongers
that.
don't freak out. Apparently there is a Supreme Court in England.
Yeah, so again, the key term
Or
here
in
is
the UK,
there's a Supreme Court. In fact, there's a Supreme Court in every single state, but that state usually doesn't have judicial review. They can't strike down the laws as they please. It's just the highest court of appeal. All they do is
but here's the issue. If we do have a constitution, so I think you can make a logically sound argument. I don't think or a logically valid argument. I don't think it's a sound argument, but you can make a valid argument that you could abolish the Supreme Court. I don't think you can make a valid argument that you could abolish the Supreme Court without abolishing the Constitution. If we have a Constitution, you need a body with the power to enforce that Constitution upon the legislature with relative impunity. They have to be able, when the entire legislature is doing something wrong according to the Constitution, to be able to overrule that legislature and make them abide by the Constitution.
I would agree
or
with
we
you
could just change the
except for this idea of relative impunity.
I want to give space to Sock because I know he's been tweeting out abolish the Supreme Court, abolish the Supreme Court, abolish the Supreme Court. So I want to give him some space to defend himself. So.
Sure.
Cool.
The
Lunacy.
simple point, you look at countries in Europe, they don't have judicial review Supreme Courts. And yet, on the vast majority of measures of, like, say, personal freedom, they're going to be about as good or better on some issues than the United States is. How are they able to maintain such a high level of personal freedom without this like judicial review?
They have an
It may-
extraordinarily low level of personal freedom compared to people in the United States.
For what?
You
like
don't have
guns?
you don't have
That-
freedom of speech, and you don't.
A
have
guy went to
guaranteed freedom of
jail
speech
for
in the
teaching
UK.
his dog to 𝕾𝖎𝖙. Come on.
Yeah, literally. Like you
a
don't
lot
have
of European
the
countries have worse freedom of speech in terms of like the First Amendment, but in terms of other freedoms of speech, now they're better than half the Republican states on abortion.
Okay, well, okay.
How
yeah,
do you
if
measure
I
it?
That's
segment-
not
if I
freedom of
segment
speech.
every
No,
right
I think
into
he just
some
meant
types
freedoms.
and other types, I could say Somalia has better versions of some types of free speech than the United States. It's
Sure.
just 90% of free speech. No, they don't. But
Well, and that's what I'm
So
trying to
like-
get at is how are these countries functioning well without judicial review? How do you explain Europe
I
not having judicial review?
we would
Are they,
argue
like-
they're not functioning well because they don't have a guaranteed right to free speech. They don't have a
Oh.
guaranteed right to self-defense.
Yeah,
They don't have a
okay.
guarantee. A lot of these.
Yeah,
guarantees.
so
By
so
that
then we're
logic-
just not agree. No, you go first, SCL. I apologize.
Well, by that logic, when the Supreme Court said that, hey, maybe it's fine that black people don't have the right to vote for fucking 50 years, that was totally fine. And we did have a Supreme Court. So what the fuck happened?
So hold on. The Supreme Court, first of all, dictated that black people could vote, and they also in 2003 exercised their judicial review and said,
Yeah,
"Sorry, you
today,
can't. Yeah,
what
you can't
happens?
have you. Yeah, even so back then, right? I don't disagree with you that the Supreme Court did at certain times make terrible rulings. Now there were oftentimes were activist judges like 𝕾𝖎𝖏 versus 𝕾𝖍𝖎, terrible case. Other cases, 𝕾𝖍𝖏𝖙, all of them were I think wrong decisions made by activist judges that circumvented constitutional protections, but. None of those cases were not based on originalist interpretation. They were based on we got to get political shit done now. And in 2003, when they struck down the law against gay sex, right? That was judicial review. Are you opposed to that?
No, you know how other countries did it? They passed a fucking law. That's it. How did
Yes,
Finland
these-
do it? How
in
did
the-
They
Norway
were
do
at
it?
they were at
They passed a
mercy
fucking
to the
law.
majority. I don't
Yes.
disagree. They're at mercy to the majority. And in the
And
United States,
SDL,
if we were at mercy to the majority, burning the flag would be illegal. The Supreme Court has protected us constantly on that issue.
Yes.
Yeah.
Laws
And
would still be enacted in states.
Go ahead, Prime.
like-
Prime. I want to hear from Prime.
Yeah. So my positions are different from SDL's. We aren't completely aligned here, which is fair. But to 𝕍𝖶, then to 𝕾𝖏𝖏. To 𝕍𝖶, look, this is just going to be a difference of principles. Like what you said previously to SDL, saying that we would look at meaning you, will look at the people of Europe as less free because they have less freedom of speech and don't have the right to self-defense. Well, I would say that they're more free from receiving racial harassment that people who like me have to deal with this in the country, and more free to not die, not be mowed down the streets in their schools, right? They have the freedom to live without bullets entering their bodies, right? So in that case, I think they just have a bit more liberty than we do.
Okay, so
But
you're saying
whatever.
that the
But again,
American
hold on.
You're
That's
saying
just-
hold on.
hold on.
You're
That's
saying
just,
the American
that's just-
legislature
I'm
has
saying-
revoked people's freedom to live.
I'm saying that
No,
this
the
is a difference
Constitution
in
has.
principles. That
No, yeah,
when
either way.
SDL says that they are more free, it's because he has a different set of principles than you have, right? We're not going to bridge that gap here, and that's fine. And then 𝕾𝖏𝖏, you said something.
Then it's not.
What
an
was the
argument
last
'cause it's
thing?
subjective
What was the last
interpretation.
thing that you said, 𝕾𝖏𝖏?
There was a couple people that talked in between. I apologize.
You said something.
I think, yeah, you were.
It's important to have judicial review because judicial review struck down things like sodomy laws and legislation against gay marriage.
exactly. Right.
Well, yeah. No, well, I think one thing I was going to react to, but I can still react to that. I agree that we need judicial review. That I don't know how we do this, but I don't think it requires impunity to do such, right? I think that there could be a check saying that, hey, if you get 75% of the Senate, 75% of the House,
amendment, constitutional amendment.
No.
It's
but
only
but
2/3.
that's not. But it's more than that.
Only.
You understand it's more than
What,
that.
2/3
You have
compared to
go through
75%? You're saying
You have-
75%.
There's nothing more than
You
that.
have to
There's
go
nothing
through the
more
state legislators to also do that, or you have to do a constitutional convention. And guess what?
That's easier than
really
75%. That's
Well,
easier than
anyway,
75%.
I literally, hold on. I literally just gave you a different standard, right? A lower standard to
Lower.
do so. Yeah, it is. Whatever. You can come up with your own
75?
standards. That's not the details of the standard don't matter. As long as it's something that you can reach. It's a higher threshold that we could reasonably reach, right?
When was
So
the
you come
last
up
time
with-
we reached
so you
75%
can come
on
up, shut up.
anything?
You can come up with your own standard. I don't give a shit, right? Do it yourself. I don't fucking care. The point is that we have another check on their power. That's it.
Okay,
No, but that's not it, because
wait. My standard is the one we have that we've already done like 28
Yeah.
times, which is change things, right? Using the constitutional amendment process, which we have, which is easier than 75%, by the way.
And it's the best way.
Using that process, we can make amendments, and we could say, hey, the Supreme Court found this to be unconstitutional. Yeah, they were right. So let's change the Constitution. We can do that. And the big thing here is the difference between us, the two sides here, is as I think was already said, like SGL even admitted at the beginning, right? You guys are very openly in favor of putting your politics in the court, while we are talking about, no, we want a strict judicial system, right? A legal process that justices have to go through. And that's why we agree with cases like 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙, right? In which the political outcome is terrible, even though we agree with the legal reasoning. And in fact, a lot of conservatives hated the fact that Gorsuch protected trans rights in bathrooms, right?
Mhm.
But legally, he kind of had a good point.
Okay, I want to give some space to Omni. I'm trying to get in here a little bit. Go ahead.
Yeah, so about that, I don't know. I think if we're talking about an institution where the only check that you are proposing against it is that we have to change the Constitution, I think that's kind of fucked up, right? That's the only check that you can come up with now that against the Supreme Court, that you had to change the Constitution. I think that we should have more checks against them because they have so many checks against the other two branches.
What about
But we have
limits?
almost the only thing I can think of is that the Congress can impeach them, right? But that's only ever happened fucking once ever in our 250 years of history.
What about term
So,
limits?
yeah, sure, why not? I think we should do that. Yeah.
Is that really an effective check, though? Because if their term ends and a Republican president replaces them with another conservative, you're whining again about how we should.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
abolish
Yeah,
the
I don't know
court
why.
no. Here's the thing. I'm not whining about that. Instead, I'm saying that only happened because you
Well, no, these guys
motherfuckers
would, though,
didn't
'cause
go
it's-
out and fucking vote.
Well,
Why
no,
does
'cause
a
it's
term
we
limit
are
help?
in this mess to
a
begin
term
with.
limit is not a
I-
check on power. That's the thing.
Yeah, why does it help?
Yeah, it's not a check on power unless a Democrat is in power at the time when there's a conservative majority,
It-
or
it
a
would-
Republican is in power when there's a liberal majority.
It
They
gives-
want. Well, hold on. They want a check, basically, and I don't even think they disagree with this, even though it is a simplification of their argument. They want a check where they see a case they don't like, and there is a system in which they can overturn that case. Not down the road, they can replace enough justices to get it overturned later. They want to check. And what I'm saying is we have those checks. And the reason why you guys aren't proposing very specific new checks other than prime is because when you do propose them, other than abolishing SDL, well, even with abolishing, they're really easy to pick apart and say that's fucking stupid, because any check beneath what we have would pretty much undermine the purpose of the court in its essence. The
Okay,
reason why we would change a constitutional, the reason you pass a constitutional amendment and why that is the best fucking check is because, one, it is a lot easier than 75%. And two, you don't have to worry about when new justices come in, what their political alignment is, because you've now put in writing a very specific code that they have to follow.
Okay, Sakdan, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say there have been very specific reforms proposed. Like actually, fucking 𝕵𝖎𝖎 talked about some two specific ones when I debated 𝕵𝖎𝖎 forever ago. Lactoid probably remembers that one. I think the specific proposal that I recommended is a 20-year term limit and putting 5 justices in at a time, and then using ranked choice vote. Because what we're really interested in doing is trying to have the Supreme Court be an approximation of where Congress is. Because it's politicized. The Supreme Court's always going to be political. All we wanted to do is not drift too far from Congress. And our hope is that as an anti-majoritarian institution filled with people who really care about shit like freedom, they might do a slightly better job than Congress at using whatever judicial power review powers they have to strike down shit laws that restrict people's freedoms and expand those that enable people's freedoms.
Okay,
That's
so
it.
as I said, when you bring up those very specific reforms, you always can get nitpicked for them undermining the very essence. You just said, as an anti-majoritarian body, they will function better if they match the majority in Congress.
They always have.
How
there's a
would
reason they were
Not
pro-slavery.
true.
No,
There's a
they
reason they were
currently
pro-slavery.
they
when
currently do
Congress was
not.
pro-slavery.
They
the current
currently do not.
yeah.
They're just
The current court is the most honest and actually using legal reasoning going through these cases more so than
Yeah,
prior.
and hold on. You're saying they currently match the majority in Congress? No, they don't. They're a 6-3 majority in the court. Democrats have the majority in one chamber of Congress. Republicans have a razor-thin majority in the other one. They very much do not. And if they do match the majority, how are they anti-majoritarian?
He wants them to do it. He wants them to match.
That's the argument, right? That part of the reason that we're displeased about the court is because it's so far out of alignment with Congress and with the popular opinion. Now,
but you said as an anti-majoritarian body, they would function better.
You gotta let him finish. You gotta let him finish. Go ahead, finish.
No, it is an anti-majoritarian body, but the fact is that no matter how anti-majoritarian you put it, if 80% of the population is in favor of slavery, as they were for a period of time, they'll put pro-slavery people on the court and they'll rule in favor of slavery. Like, nothing can protect your rights given 20 years of pro-slavery voters.
Hold on. I have a question for you, SDL, because now I'm finally going to go in on this. Do you think was the majority of the country, like when they overturned Brown v. Board of,
even
when they
like
did Brown v. Board of Education? What?
Go ahead.
When they did Brown v. Board of Education, it's not like that was something that was like super popular and that everybody wanted. Like, fucking Eisenhower had to send like men with guns to escort like the first black girls to that school, so that there was no violence about it.
Politically, it'd be even more, like, less likely for these like good things like ending slavery and shit to happen, right? Because like it wasn't like winning democratically.
Well, so it was about 10 years ahead of winning democratically. And so the idea is that the Supreme Court, by like the nature of being highly educated liberals from Ivy Leagues who care a lot innately about freedom, like it's literally just a personality thing. They tend to be the type of people who select for cases that enable more freedom than do Congress people. Also because Congress people are elected by the public, and the public
but they did it like
that's a good thing, right?
The 14th Amendment was better than the Plessy v. Ferguson one.
Wait, that's better that they're like more freedom oriented than Congress, right? So why would you want to put the power, like all the power back in Congress?
You want to limit judicial review to a certain degree, and you want a better, like the ideal is a better functioning Congress.
What degree? So, what's the standard? You have to have a standard.
Sure, compared to like, I don't know, the European High Court, something like that.
No. What is the concrete standard? Where does a judge no longer have judicial review in your perspective?
Sure. So an example would be you could keep judicial review as strong, but weaken the constitutional barrier or reduce the judicial strength. And like those are basically the options.
Again,
in Europe, you can change the constitution more easily. That's the argument we're giving, right?
I want to have a good conversation. I want to have a good conversation with you, but you're using soft.
Lactoid asked a good question. What would so right now it's 2/3. What would it be under your, like, where is your line here? Are we talking like a simple majority, a 60-40? What are we looking at?
I mean, the argument should be probably like 75-60%, somewhere in that range. Yeah.
That's what it is. It's 60%.
Yeah. Well, right 66. Now, no, it's
66.6.
It's 2/3 of the Senate and then 3/4 of the state. So roughly 75% have to agree. So that's the upper end, right? And I'm suggesting maybe move it down 5, somewhere in that range. That's
so 60. You want 60?
Let's say simple majority of the states in 66 in Congress.
Maybe like 60. I don't know that the finagling is like super important. The idea is that like
it kind of is though.
Wait. Also, why does this is ridiculous? So this is weird because, like, okay, fine. Even if we went along with this, like, first of all, I don't see how this addresses your concerns at all. Because what I foresee happening is this gets used against your side, like for your politics, and then you're angry and you want to revert it back.
It's like the filibuster, dude. Senator Mitch McConnell was when all the Republicans wanted the filibuster abolished. Mitch McConnell was like the bulwark who was like, we are not abolishing the fucking filibuster. And the Democrats all praised him for it. And now that they had a majority and the Republicans are stopping them, they were like, we need to abolish the filibuster. Mitch McConnell is an evil lizard person. Like,
they could change the Constitution to abolish the 14th Amendment if they got powerful enough, right? Are you concerned about that?
I mean, we can go through the filibuster history. It's a tit for tat. It's been going back since 87.
That's what we're saying. That's why you need a bulwark with impunity against the legislature, because the legislature is a fair weather body.
Yes.
Well, to some degree, yes, but it's not the point that I'm trying to get at is that it's not an effective bulwark. The argument that I'm pointing to in like historical cases and in modern cases is that it's not an effective protector of freedom, right?
It seems to be one of the most. Yeah, because other than I mean, if you want to just disqualify a bunch of versions of freedom, as far as freedom that you can legislate in a body, as far as freedom in terms of what the government can't keep you from doing, the United States has a higher degree of freedom than every country that you've mentioned and compared them against.
Wait, also, you agreed that the Supreme Court like protects freedom more than Congress does. So why would you abolish it?
Well, so the idea is that it protects it on more when it's like a fairly representative body. The argument that we're trying to give is that right now, when it leans like very hard towards one side, it has very strong partisan impulses to try and restrict freedoms for those that it opposes.
What do
Right,
you
you
mean?
said you said abolish it. You started off by saying abolish it,
Okay.
right? So
Okay. Yep. We're circling the drain on this one.
Sorry.
right when I'm
Oh,
turning the
yeah,
screws.
why you had
I
him.
was turning the screws. Yeah.
Yeah. So, again, we're not quite aligned, and I don't know why you even fighting on these grounds, because if your point is just abolish the court, then just like none of that matters, right? Just like get rid of the court
Intermediate
and then
steps,
you're done.
right?
Yeah. Oh, fair enough.
Yeah, I like that.
and
You said it's better than Congress.
and to Kalindo, I'm going to break your heart because we're not quite aligned here, because I am for packing the court.
Yeah,
so,
that's
but-
dumb.
Yeah,
But
sure.
go
So
on.
what I wanted to say is that, and I didn't get to expand on this previously, but I think the courts are political, but I think that's okay. What I hate is this idea of religialism, these people are above this, right? And that they're having some sort of honest reading of the Constitution. I don't believe that. But that's all right. That's all right with me. It's okay that when we see hearings like to let justices in, right? That Republicans will ask like conservative leading justices, are you going to abolish abortion or whatever, right? Like you go down a whole list of things. Like, are you going to do these things? Because that's what they're looking for. And that's okay. You can put them on, right? And
Okay,
on
can
the
I-
other side
can I
can do
ask a
so as
quick
well.
question?
No, I'm not. Nope, because I'm talking. No, you can't, because I'm talking. So anyway, but I am for massively packing the court, massively expanding the number of judges.
Can you
and
define
so-
that?
Even
massively?
if Donald,
Hold on,
Yeah,
just
yeah,
stop.
sure,
Let
because,
Jeff
like,
Ted, Jeff Ted, give me a minute.
He
Like, are
can't
we
help
talking
himself.
like 4 justices? 5?
Yeah, because
Like
there's
50.
so
no,
many
like,
gaping
like,
holes.
hold on, my God, you literally can't see what I just said. He can't help himself, and then he did it again because he can't help himself. Shut
No,
up.
I can't.
All
I
right, shut the
disagree.
fuck up. Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. All right. But so having 50 justices and then like having them rotate. That way it dilutes the power of any particular judge. That way it's not like a life, or it doesn't feel to the populace like a life or death situation when a Supreme Court justice leaves the court, either in a casket or by retirement. So I just want to dilute their power, and I'm okay with them being partisan. That's fine with me. Right? Because they're human, and that's the way it's going to be. They're going to look at things through their own experiences, their political lenses, their religious views, and that's all right.
Prime, would you compromise? We expand it to 50, but we keep like the amount of originalists the same as like the percentage at 66.6%.
If the Republicans can get them in, then that's their prerogative.
Then what's the
Okay.
point? Like,
Well,
that's my thing is like,
But
as far as
you can keep the number the same, right? But it would be like a random selection, like per case or something, or maybe like per like a per year, like whatever.
Yep.
There's all kinds of ways to divide this. So like you wouldn't be the same number of you wouldn't know when you're going to the Supreme Court who you're going to get.
So
right?
they
And how
would,
to work that into
just so I understand this, it would be a pool of 50 that when a case comes before the Supreme Court, they would draw a certain number amongst that pool to hear and rule in that court, and that would be randomized.
Yeah, they draw, like in lower courts, they draw like from a pool of judges. You randomly get a judge, and that's how you do it. Like that's how we do in lower courts. So we can do that in the Supreme Court. A pool of people, and we get a group together, and then they hear a case.
Yeah, a lot of countries do this, by the way. So, like England does this. They have panels of judges decide this. So, like, it's not,
That's
something
not
doesn't
Yeah,
happen.
Jeb,
necessarily.
and I'm done talking now, so you can talk too.
Wait, wait,
not
I'm
sorry, you went
necessarily-
so many places. I
Yeah,
forgot my
I'm sorry.
question.
Was it too big brain for you? Sorry, as well as
No, you just
everyone
said
else could
so
follow
many-
it, but apparently not you.
If this is what you mean by packing.
and I can do it very
Yeah,
slowly.
It's
I mean,
very
this isn't
different.
what's like what
Yeah.
they're threatening with the packing thing, right? If this is what
Yeah.
you mean by packing, then like I'll have to think about it, because maybe that's not a terrible. I don't really know what it changes, but maybe that's not a terrible idea. I don't
Yeah,
know.
that's not a
Well,
bad idea.
Sure,
really.
sure, but,
no,
but,
I
like
think-
I don't see how it like addresses like I guess the concern
that's
that
the
brings
thing.
us here today. But what's being
What
threatened?
do you
when
think
people
is
talk
my
about packing,
concern?
right? When people, what I assumed was your concern is, and maybe I'm wrong, is what we're all the fucking hoopla on Twitter right now, which is SCOTUS made decision we don't like, so we got to get more less. We got to get less principal justices in there to rule in our political favor. That's
remember when I started, right? I said to Jebtan that I agree with what he said previously. That it's always my side is aggrieved now because they did something I don't like, right? Like we should be principled, like. Yeah, like it's
fair enough.
Sometimes it's going to go your way, sometimes it's not, right? And like yelling activist judges every time it doesn't go your way, I think is bullshit. So my point is about diluting the power of the court. That's all I want. Or sorry, diluting the power of the court and the individual justices, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll think about it because that's like I haven't heard that before, and that's like an interesting idea. It's just not what's being proposed for and threatened by Biden.
I do have
better idea than
I don't know that it is. Because
it's better than the alternatives.
I think the alternative that we have right now is much better than that.
No. I mean, it's better than the let's pack the court by load, like than what FDR wanted to do, for example.
Yeah, but I'm not comparing it against another alternative that is not going to happen because even the Democrat president that's currently sitting doesn't want that to happen, and most of Democrat Congress don't want it to happen.
Either of those is going to happen either way.
Yeah. So. But I'm arguing solely on the merits, and one of the issues that you have with this panel justice system, right, is say that there's 66%, again 66.6 repeating percent of these pool of judges. You have a lot of situations, which is a case that even I wouldn't want, where some cases are just going to be ruled on by 100% one side's justices. And then they establish the highest level of jurisprudence on that issue that every other court in the land has to follow. That's the reason why our Supreme Court operates differently with the understanding of the fact that they have overall jurisprudence over every other level of court in the land. That's the reason why we don't operate like other countries where they don't have judicial review and they don't have the ability to
have judicial review.
Jurisprudence.
Sorry, I talked to you. I shouldn't have done that.
No, what I'm saying is if you have judicial review and you can't also do this system because you wouldn't want 9 conservative justices to get picked out of a pool for a certain issue. And now every court in every state of every count and every county in every state.
Because I would. That would be fine.
99.99. Okay. 99.99% of Americans wouldn't want a.
Okay. Well, you're not arguing with them. You're arguing with me.
I don't care. Shh. Most people don't. This isn't going to happen because most people don't want a 100% stacked one direction court to decide on something that sets jurisprudence for every court in every county of every state of every.
Wait, no, this is our whole point. We don't want a stacked court. We want a court that represents Congress. That's our point. I'm glad you agree.
No, that's not Prime Kai's point.
No, I know. Prime Kai's is supporting the 5-5-5 lottery model. If he doesn't know about it, that's the 𝕵𝖎𝖎 model. That's like the logic underneath it. And I oppose it because I don't support lottery models. I think that it's important to have like the fixed term limit instead. But
yeah, I'm arguing against
what you're getting mad about is the court being stacked. You're mad if it's 9 Republicans or 9 Dems. That's what we're mad about right now because the court is stacked. Do you understand why? It's so frightening.
I understand that. What I'm saying is that's the reason why we have one court of 9 justices that both the legislature and the executive branch nominate and then approve. That's why we have it this way.
But it's a random function of when they fucking die.
Yeah,
it's not that random because you still have the executive.
Let me ask directly.
As opposed to 20 years, why is that? Like, why is 20 years somehow like less random?
Because it's
on aggregate. Well, no, it's fixed. It's fixed, but you don't know who's going to win the election that particular year.
Exactly.
So what are you accomplishing with a 20?
My suggestion was twofold. One, do like a 20-year term, and then 2, elect 5 at a time through ranked choice votes. So you'll get like 1 left, 1 right, center left, center right, and 1 middle. Right. So
but you also don't want judicial review in the Supreme Court.
Well, the initial thing was abolish the court. So I'm glad we moved off that. Yeah. We're back into like reasonable territory.
Yeah. I mean,
now the second thing here though is like, and I hate this, and I don't want to play. Jeb, you're playing into it a little bit, but the whole like. We need 5 from this side and 5 from this side. Again, that like assumes, and this has already been said, it both assumes like an inherent political nature of the court. And and you're pushing a specific political nature of the court. Now I'm telling you, there are different, now this is a very long conversation, so I'm not going to go all the way through it, but there's different schools of legal thought, right? Textualism, originalism, living constitution theory, et cetera, et cetera. And what my point is that like these are not equal. It's not like, oh, it's like one side and the other side, it's equal. No, it's not how it works, right? Like living constitution theory is explicitly and openly partisan. They are intending to be partisan. They want to change the Constitution to match like the quote needs of the day. That is inherently partisan compared to originalism, which is not about that. They rule based on like the actual like legal reasoning of historical interpretation about what that particular law was supposed to be about. And that's why when you have like originalist justices, they rule in ways like recently we saw, like protecting trans people in bathrooms, like in McGirt versus Oklahoma, and a number of other cases where they didn't rule in favor of like the Republican agenda. They ruled specifically against it because legally they actually are principled, as opposed to people like Sotomayor, who is not principled and in fact like false, like literally misrepresent stats in her own fucking dissent. Like
Yeah, that
they're
also
just like
reminds
brutally
me-
partisan people.
That reminds me of my
Well,
question for Prime. I just want to say, when I have time, pass it to me to ask that question to Prime that I now remember.
Okay, $5 from Temperate Takes to say, should Supreme Justices be voted in by the federal judiciary like how cardinals choose the Pope? Mostly a joke, but still curious what the panel thinks. So should
don't
the
know how
justices...
cardinals-
So what that means basically is so the justices appoint and vote on other justices rather than the
no.
Congress at all.
Please no. Please no. Why would we want that? Does anyone want that? I don't.
Well, that would
Maybe,
like
yeah,
that
why
might that
not?
maybe that
would
might
that
insulate
depoliticize them
them.
a little bit.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
Even
'cause now
worse.
they don't have,
Like-
they don't have to appeal to like partisan politicians now, right?
You can okay. You know that there's liberal
no
courts
thanks.
and conservative courts. Everyone knows you go to like the XYZ district and you'll get a liberal ruling versus a
You
conservative
basically
ruling.
create
Are you-
an upper class, right?
Originalists,
like a
there's
special
hats.
upper class, like whoever happened to be in the court at that time. They are like they can push their views into eternity now because they can pick the people who pick the people who pick the people. So like no, I would hate that. That'd be nonsense. I would like a changing Congress to be able to pick the justices. I think
It'd be
awful
less
idea.
political if they didn't have to appeal to like
Hold
openly
on, but
partisan.
according to you,
Congress
that doesn't.
people.
Hold on, according to you, that doesn't actually happen though. So what happens is
No,
like
no, it
they
does
go
happen.
into the hearings, right? And they say whatever, right? Usually, well, I'm going to rule as the Constitution tells me to, right? They'll just say that, all of them, conservative leaning ones and liberal leaning ones. But then once they get there, then like the originalists will always be originalists. So then it actually doesn't matter what they say in those hearings.
No,
right?
no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm like, I accept that there's going to be like, unfortunately, I'd like to minimize it as much as possible. There is some like political bleed into the Supreme Court. The goal is to minimize that. I said at the beginning, right? You want to minimize that by having an actual principled legal framework as to how to analyze law, which is like historical review compared to what like the fucking like quote unquote liberal justices support, which is just whatever suits the political agenda of the left.
My guys to be able to pick the ones.
No, it's not equal.
Who
It's
show
not
up.
equal.
That's exactly what you just said,
No,
right?
no.
Like the people agree with me.
In a
I
world
like
of
originalism.
partisanship,
I like originalists, so it'd be great
principles
if group
feels
of
like
originalists
oppression.
pick other originalists, and then we would solve all our problems.
In a world of partisanship, principles feel like oppression.
Yeah, okay.
That's literally what's
just
happening
agree
right
with
now.
me.
Okay,
All right,
okay,
good to know.
I want to pass it over to Stockton left, and then we'll go to Omni, and then we'll go to Jeb. And that's the order.
I had a question for 𝕵𝖎𝖙. Let's say that you had a constitution and it was laid down by Karl Marx, and 400 years later, people say, I'm an originalist. I'm just interpreting things as the founders wanted. Would you say that's a non-political ruling?
So if they're interpreting it as
you would say that originalist Marxists would be non-political.
As long as they're interpreting the law as like from the Constitution in which it is written, and there's like an actual process to it, not like the needs of the day, then I would say it's a non-political process. Yes.
What do you think politics is?
Yeah.
What do you think? Who was it written by?
Wait.
I'll answer.
Let's Stockton do this, right?
There's like the general, like, I guess, politics of, everything is political or whatever. But what we're referring to here is like partisanship in the sense of you have somebody who's trying to get a particular like political agenda done. The court should never do that, ever. The court should only be focused on a honest using a
And
honest legal framework to come to a conclusion.
Didn't have political intentions,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
They weren't slave owners. They weren't rapists. They weren't doing any of the things. They
Lactoid, when
they
did
didn't
you
want
say
to.
that? 'Cause I
They
didn't hear
didn't
that.
want
They were
to
capitalists.
inculcate the power of white men. They had none of those things in mind. And so when we look at that Constitution, when we examine it, right, we should definitely ignore all of that. That doesn't exist, right?
This is why I said. This is why I said ultimately, there's the general definition of everything's political.
Yeah, but
I get that.
it's the politics that you like.
No.
Basically, that's just
no,
the
it's
politics
not.
that you like.
I
Yes,
was
it is
able to
by
name
another
multiple.
name.
I was able
That's
to name
exactly
multiple
what it
cases
is.
where the politics
No.
were not what I liked. Okay.
Yeah, it
And I
doesn't.
wanted-
No.
and I-
That
no,
doesn't
this is
matter.
important. Let me
That
finish,
doesn't
let me
matter.
finish,
It
let me
matters a
finish.
lot, actually.
No, it matters. It matters a fuck ton. Okay, because what I mean by non-political, what I mean is that you could put somebody on the court who deeply hates the idea of giving half of Oklahoma to a literal ethno-state. They despise this idea, but because legally, the legal historical analysis demonstrates that actually this legally needs to be the case, they do it anyway, right? They do it in despite of their political interests. This is what I mean by non-political. They're actually doing their job. They're following the law. It'd be like a cop. When I'm referring to like a non-political cop, like you could say, well, aren't laws political? Yeah, I guess, but I don't want cops to be enforcing laws based on their own personal political beliefs. I want cops enforcing the law based on what the law is. Same thing with Supreme Court justices.
Yep.
Yeah, but the law is political again. Like
That's
written by
that's not an
political
argument for what we're
people.
talking
Like
about.
it's not handed down by some fucking deity. So,
Yeah,
like,
but
I
this
just don't
goes
understand.
back. This goes back to what I'm saying. Every single one of you who are willing to say that like the Supreme Court's just political, we should get rid of it or completely reform it? Are you willing to also throw out the Constitution with the understanding that the Constitution then is inherently political and so it shouldn't be involved?
Yeah,
I am
once
willing to
again,
change
well,
the Constitution. Yes.
Yeah,
We
Some I
can
would
do
throw out,
that.
but-
We can do that. We
Yeah,
have
it's really
a-
fucking hard to do.
I've stated
though.
from the beginning.
Good.
I've stated from the
Good.
beginning that it's fine that it's political. Like, I'm okay with that. That's all right, right? Republicans want to put their people on. That's great, right? And call them originalists. Sure, whatever.
No, but that's the thing
then they
is
can do
you
that,
disagree
right?
with
Then
Lactoid that
liberals,
originalism. Hold on.
it-
You disagree with Lactoid that originalism is actually based in the Constitution.
yeah. But hold on, that's a separate argument. What I'm
I
saying
know,
is for
but
the-
you should have.
Yeah,
I'm going to push you
hold
on that.
dude,
With
I don't
my
know why you
question.
don't understand this. I'm gonna try it again with you.
I
all right?
understand
Try
it
to
very
listen very
clearly.
No, I don't think you do, because then I would
Sure,
have to
say
explain
it
this to you,
again
but
so I
I'll
can
do it
understand
again
it
once
the
again.
same way I do.
Great.
Sure.
Any which way. So I think that that the court itself is perfectly fine being a political or being staffed by political people, because they are human beings and they have a perspective, and that's going to bleed into anything they do, right? And I can't expect anything better of them, right? I hate the pretending that they don't, right? Which is what originalism is. But I'm fine with people having that interpretation. The whole point is that each individual justice, at least for me, other people are making a different argument. Each individual justice is just way too powerful. Way too powerful. So let's dilute their individual power. Yeah, and you didn't get it before. And then, all right, great.
I'm going to ask you a question now. Can you handle two questions, or is that going to lead to another rant? And I can't ask the second one.
I actually have a question I want to ask.
Hold on, because I had this one like 30 minutes ago.
Yeah, he was being obnoxious. But see, that was already one question.
Okay. After Jebtan's done, stop. After Jebtan's done with his questions, he gets two.
Three questions.
His riddles 3. Okay, his riddles 3. Then Kalinda, you're up next. Go ahead.
Okay, would you agree then, since your idea is that originalism is political, no matter what, it's not actually originalism, that your system sort of hinges on that idea?
My system sort of hinges on idea. I'm sorry, I don't understand. Could you?
On the idea that originalism is not real and that it is actually just politically driven judges kind of doing what they want, using originalism as a tag.
My system that I propose to you, I don't think it does hinge on that, right? Like, even if there's another judicial or legal framework that justices use, like whichever it is, pick it, right? It dilutes the power of each individual judge, which is my goal. So it doesn't hinge on the originalism.
So still, I want to needle on the originalism thing, because I think it does hinge on originalism not being like originalism being equal to living constitutionalism, in the sense that they're both just free flowy political things. So I want to poke at you. Can you point out one Supreme Court case with an originalist ruling and point out how their legal argument was
Brown
not
versus
actually
Board of
original.
Education. The
I'm
originalists in
I'm asking
1868
Prime
were
Kai.
racist as fuck.
Okay, I'm asking Prime Kai.
He means Plessy v. Ferguson, I think.
Can you point out a currently standing Supreme Court decision that was an originalist court decision, Prime Kai, and tell me what part of their legal reasoning was not originalist, since you are certain that that is the case.
So I don't have one on hand. I'm sorry, I'm not a legal expert. So like I don't have one like
Okay.
on it. I'd have to provide look up one of those.
Cool.
Okay, is that your questions? Cool. Riddles 3
That's it.
answered. The One Ring of Power continues on its way to Mordor. Linda, go ahead.
Okay. Lectron, I'm curious because I'm wondering about originalism. Do you think I don't know if you're a Christian or not. Do you believe in secularism and the separation of church and state?
Yeah, I mean, more or less. I personally am like a hardcore like atheist, like Christopher Hitchens nerd.
Okay, what about you, 𝕵𝖎𝖙? I guess so you disagree with conservatives who say that the separation of church and state is bullshit and it's not in the Constitution.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry,
Okay,
she was asking my
you-
opinion on it.
you too, Lactoy? Yeah, either one of you. Or
yeah,
you-
yeah. So so what I'm okay. So the separation of church and state, like the foundational principle is the First Amendment of the state should not respect the establishment of any religion. I
Yes.
absolutely agree that is a foundational tenet, and that absolutely needs to be like enforced. That doesn't necessarily mean that like people's like secular moral codes can't be influenced by their like religion. So an example of this would be like abortion, where I think that like Congress people who are like quote unquote pro-life for like religious reasons, but there is like a secular basis for like pro-life decisions. They're not like enforcing religion; they're just like legislating morality.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I don't. Yeah, I'm not talking about abortion. Actually, the
Sure.
example that I usually like to go to is prayer in schools, which I don't think should be a thing enforced by the school, and I believe
agree.
that it used to be. Okay, then I don't think that either one of you, because I was trying to find like an instance of like I do think that originalism is basically it's literally just conservatism, and like if you don't think there's anything political about that, then I think you're being kind of silly. Because there is something political about that, right? Because you're basically saying like we don't want to update like our reading of this or whatever. And I would argue that like over the course of its history, America has in some ways updated its reading of certain things. Like I know that the Declaration of Independence is not in the Constitution, but that idea that everybody is equal under the law. Well, the Declaration of Independence originally read all men are created equal. But this idea that everybody is equal under the law is like, I think, been one of the guiding principles of America. But it just took them a while to get there. You know what I mean?
Right. Let me clarify real quick. So when you say it's like originalism is conservatism, it depends how you're referring to like conservative. I don't.
I mean, we don't want to change anything.
Right. I agree that like yes, originalism has like it's because you're like doing a analysis of like what the intention of the people who made the law was at the time. Like under strict definition, that would be inherently conservative, but it's not partisan in the sense of like right now there's like conservative Republicans who push for like crazy shit like outlawing burning the flag is a great example. That is more popular among Republicans, and Trump pushed it. And the Supreme Court has consistently four times the Supreme Court said, no, you don't get to do that. The First Amendment protects your right to burn the American flag, regardless of what these crazy Republicans say. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing when you crush anybody being partisan and crazy when it comes to the Constitution.
Yeah, and when we're saying originalist, we don't necessarily mean you can't update your reading. What we're saying is when you update your reading, you update it for accuracy to what the original intention of the document was. You don't update it in terms of, well, what would people think of it now? You update it based on, oh, we understand now that men in that context means man, like humans, like not men as in like heterosexual straight white males, right? That's what we're saying is you can update that reading. All men are created equal.
When I say update reading, not what do people think of it now.
Yeah. So we think you can update it for the sake of
Gotcha.
accuracy, just not for applicability to the current day. That's not what we're.
Let's talk about applicability. When you asked earlier for an example of originalism leading to like a bad conclusion, I pointed to fucking Brown versus Board of Education. When
he means Plessy v. Ferguson.
No. I mean Brown versus Board of Education.
Wait, really?
When 1868 rolled around and they put out the amendment saying equality under the law, a lot of the people who legislated that went on to be fucking insanely racist. Some of them wanted to send black people back to Africa. They probably would have been fine with a lot of the Jim Crow laws. And even if they weren't, the argument is that we are like way, way, way more anti-racist in our application of the 14th Amendment today than we were in 1868. How do you say that originalism is totally value neutral and work with that?
So you're just wrong with the 14th Amendment briefly, right? The 14th Amendment was part of it was one of the Reconstruction Amendments. And so it was like passed during a time just after the Civil War of like incredible like progressivism within the United States and generally like just among all legislatures that mattered, because the South wasn't part of the US, so they weren't able to block a lot of that shit. So the 14th Amendment, as it was being like enforced and put into place, was actually like pretty like what you would consider maybe anti-racist, right? It was pretty like not actually racist, and the people who voted on it were not like particularly racist, even by today's standards.
I mean, many of the same people supported like the Africa Colonization Society. Like fucking Lincoln supported.
Lincoln, yes, Lincoln did support like that specific like proposal. But again, as the 14th Amendment
started it,
I know. It was like it was a society formed. They didn't like force black people to go there. But yes, there was this grand plan. But real quick, the 14th Amendment and the people who supported it like did not push that. And in fact, a lot of the policies that actually protected and pushed were like pretty like progressive.
Sure. Did it lead to school desegregation? Did it lead to equality in all ways before the law in 1868?
So, briefly, it led to a lot of desegregation, but then following, there was like, I forget the name of the president who came afterwards, but you had a lot of reversals of the Reconstruction era. But at the time the 14th Amendment passed, there was, I don't know if every single school was, but there was a fuck ton of schools that were. And in fact, there was like specific schools that were being opened for people who like couldn't access them.
Okay. For reference, the illiteracy rate, this will be the last thing I say, the illiteracy rate among black people at the time was 90%. So
yeah, because we just ended the Civil War.
Yeah, but they didn't get fucking schooling for a century. Like on comparable levels. Literacy rates only hit majority among black people, but like 1910.
Fondue for $5
before board of
just
education.
Real quick, this is to the Supreme Court needs some serious changes side, for lack of a better term, for your side, right? Fondue
the correct
asks,
side. You can just say that.
Yeah, sure. Should human rights exist? Should they be codified by law? And should laws be consistent?
Yes. I know that I'm not like the extreme side, but yes. I don't know why that question would be asked to those guys.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm not for getting rid of human rights, just to be clear. So
yeah. Can you repeat it again? Should it be codified by law?
Should human rights exist? Should they be codified by law? And should laws be consistent?
Laws be consistent. Yes. Maybe I can think of a
agree.
reason why they're not, but I would have to think on that one.
So yes, the answer is yes.
The question that wasn't asked, but I think implied, and perhaps I'm wrong here, but this is my reading of it, my originalist interpretation of the super chat, right? Is that if that's the case, then you need a body that has the power of judicial review to say this law is inconsistent. It does not represent what's codified in law right now.
I guess that's SDL, if you want to answer that one.
Is that
SDL?
How do we square these things is what I'm asking, right? Like, how do we square to SDL? Sure, to SDL specifically, if he's the only one that has a stake. How do we square, right, that there can be a time where the majority, without judicial review, will just pass anti-trans legislation? That will just pass, like, okay, well, we don't want hormones for anyone under 18.
I was going to ask that question too, because it seems like SDL, what you were arguing for, would actually mean tyranny of the majority.
Yeah, I want SDL to answer it. I'm curious.
To speak to that, the argument I've given is that we should want a limited amount of judicial review. It should be possible to change the Constitution more easily. It should require a higher bar to strike down laws, is my very simple suggestion. Something like that. So instead of a 5-4 case, make it a 6-3 case, something like that to strike down laws. But there is some utility of keeping a judicial review court in terms of an anti-majoritarian institution. But the short answer is that if you get enough people who like really, really oppose some human right, you will eventually lose that right, even with the Supreme Court, right? If people who were like, who wanted to like, I don't know, ban gay marriage got 80% of the votes for like 20 years, that would end gay marriage. Like there's no way the Supreme Court survives that. It's just that simple. So
They could change the amendment. They could amend the Constitution. Yeah, absolutely.
they could, but then at 80% they could, yeah. So like for a sufficiently large majority, democracy can fuck over your rights. Yeah. And there's no Supreme Court that can save you, right? So
Do you agree that it makes it a lot harder, though?
I think it makes it like one step harder. That's like the argument I'm trying to give, is that you want like a centered Supreme Court with limited judicial review that has the ability to strike out like extreme attempts to restrain people's freedom, but it's never going to be like more than one step better. That's why it's only 10 years ahead on desegregation, for example.
In certain
10 years.
It's 10 years, but on like gay marriage, it's like 10 years ahead as well. That's fucking half the states had passed it by the time the decision came around, right? It was going to be another 10 years. Half would have passed it all. Too.
Well, I'm even somewhat humoring this because like I'm not thinking about it in terms of like, at least for the purposes of this discussion, for like, do I like policy X or do I not? But like, even if we're gonna like swim in that soup for a second of like, I want the court to do what I want, politically, 10 years, that's in somebody's almost somebody's entire childhood, right? That's like 10, that's like a career, like 10 years, that's a whole system of education, right?
Yeah, and so that's
also,
what that's the argument
really,
for like court reform and that type.
Also, it's not really true, right? We didn't get. So there are a few big gun control cases. There's U.S. versus Miller, D.C. versus Heller, and then one that came right after that. Do you know how many years were between U.S. versus Miller and D.C. versus Heller?
Actually, I have no fucking idea.
It was about 75 years. And between those two bills, in the 1990s was when we got a lot of the assault weapons bans, which were based in U.S. versus Heller, which came 60 years beforehand. U.S. versus Miller was 60 years ahead of legislation, right? So in certain circumstances, especially ones that I think you guys value, which is protecting state interests against the absolution of certain rights, they're way ahead of legislators. They're not. They can't. I agree that they can't be that far ahead of all legislators because obviously a case has to come to their court. But in terms of federal legislation, which is largely what they're controlling and why they exist, they've been 60, 70, 80 years ahead a lot of times.
Well, so I can't give an exact number to it, but I actually posted a study in the group chat about this, that hostile courts and courts that go more against popular opinion are more likely to have laws struck down, and courts that like have statements that courts are more likely to rule with popular opinion. They're more likely to not strike down laws from from Congresses that agree with them. So like it's
because they're threatened with packing, right? That's why. If they were protected from packing, why would they have nothing to fear?
This study goes back to like the 1820s. It's literally so long as U.S. history.
Yeah.
The court has
courts could have been packed by like all the way back then too.
Well, it's possible. So that's actually kind of the argument I'm trying to give. You say it's not political. I'm trying to say there are guardrails on it. The guardrails are just really large right now. The guardrails right now are such that you can have a 6-3 fucking court case. And I want to, I'm sorry, not court case, a 6-3 majority from Republicans and Dem. And I want to shrink that in. I want it to approximate Congress and hopefully be like one step more towards the generally enabling individual freedom side.
This is the best way to when you're talking about how courts may be reluctant to like challenge Congress when they're very hostile. If you pass a constitutional amendment, which I'd be in favor of, like capping the number of like justices, like so no more talk of packing at all, wouldn't that like prevent them from fearing Congress stepping in and packing the court if they challenge Congress's will?
Well, maybe, but one of the arguments is that might be a bad thing because courts aren't unambiguously like courts throughout history are not.
You said they're generally good.
Well, generally they're like slightly better, but not unambiguously through history. And one possible reason that they're like generally good is they approximate court opinion, but you get educated liberals on the court. Like it's literally that's the argument that I've given. Like,
okay, so one question I've got too, because I think 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙 and I both agree that this court is one of the least political in history, and that they're bucking a lot of trends. And I think that's proven in what you just said, right? In this historical review, unpopular courts don't strike down a lot, but we're having this conversation because this very unpopular court, who is against their executive branch and their legislative branch, has struck down quite a bit. We think that the court, as of now, is moving in the right direction, bucking a lot of trends and being a lot less political. And according to your metrics, they're proving it, right?
Under threat of packing, yeah.
Yeah. They are doing what you are saying we should control. We should try to fix that popular courts strike down a lot of laws and unpopular courts don't. This unpopular court is fixing that by striking down a lot of laws while they are very unpopular. And while the media has gotten way overinflated in its power to get the popular view to be negative toward the Supreme Court, yet they are bucking the trend even harder.
Sure. The argument I'm giving is I'm not like pro or anti bucking trends or whatever. I'm pro trying to expand freedom. The argument for the court has always been that because like it's literally that you get a bunch of very highly educated lawyers who are like super ideologically committed to freedom. They're more likely to rule in favor of freedom. The argument is not like it's good for them to be unpopular, where they need to be able to be super mega unpopular. It like inevitably the courts will follow Congress's decisions, if not through the threat of court packing, through fucking dying and getting replaced.
But what we're saying
So
is
I do want to interject
what
a bit and like step back
Can I say
a bit.
one thing real quick? What point are you trying to prove, SDL?
Well, the argument is like one, that courts are always political, and that two, the argument is for like constraining that in a little bit and trying to maximize the good things about the court. Like the good things about the court is the type of people it tends to select. You don't like you explicitly want to select against partisan leadership as much as you can, but you also want to still not have a court that leans very hard one way or the other. That's like the compromise that people are looking for on the
So I want to step in and like I'm going to rewind back in time to the three questions. Oh, sorry. Do you want to say something, Omni Slap, first?
Oh no, for after you or whoever.
Okay.
I just want to put in the queue. That's all.
Sure. Okay, well, Jeb, you said that the system that I presented relies on originalism being not a thing. Could you explain why that is the case?
Well, so like we were saying, for a body that is whose function, like intended function, right, is to protect the Constitution, and as it was written, fundamentally, right, if originalism is genuine, it is better than living constitutionalism. Like it is not, or it is at least not equal to living constitutionalism, because it is doing the function of the Supreme Court if it is genuine. That's why I'm saying if you are trying to create a court that is balanced with the idea that it should just kind of be up to Congress to create whatever pool they want, and we should randomly select from that pool, that fundamentally suggests that living constitutionalists are equal to originalists. Me and Lactoid don't believe that. And the underlying argument there is that originalism is genuine. And if it is genuine, it is better because the stated purpose of the Supreme Court is to protect the Constitution as it was written.
So that's nonsense. You just make it like a logical leap, right? You say,
tell me how it is. Sure.
Okay, I'm doing it right now, right? Like as I'm saying it, as I'm speaking, I'm making it happen. So you say that originalism is better than living constitutionalism, right? That this is inherently the case, right?
Whatever. It's at least not equal, yeah.
Whether I believe that or not, I don't care. It doesn't matter, right? But the point is, you think the system you prefer is better than the system that someone else might prefer, and that the mechanism I'm using to dilute the court, therefore, would not be necessary if what you said is true, that system A is better than system B. I don't know how those two things connect, right?
Because diluting the power, just general dilution of power, is not productive if you agree with the fact that one side is fundamentally unequal and better than the other.
Are you saying
just generally diluting power? If we know for a fact, say in a hypothetical, right, we know for a fact we're talking about good versus evil, general dilution of both of their power just is not a good thing, obviously.
Good versus evil. Okay, I don't know. I'm ignoring that. But do you?
Why would you ignore it? Hold on. Do you need me to re-explain it?
Hold on. Yeah, because it's nonsense. I'm ignoring your nonsense. You spend a lot of nonsense, so I just ignore it, right? Like I have to move the conversation on. I can't jump on every dumb thing you say. But I'm going to ask you a question. So, is it your opinion that one originalist is as good as another? So that
So I'll reiterate, right?
If you take 10 originalists,
Not an
right,
actual
that they will
question.
always arrive at the same judicial conclusion, because then that would maybe matter. Then
That's
it
not
wouldn't
true,
matter, right? Because then, like,
They
why
have the same
would you
process.
need
Yep.
to dilute any individual justice if they're all going to rule the same way?
They have the same
So, like, is
process.
that your thought?
No, so what I'm saying is what 𝕾𝖏 is saying. They have the same process and the same intention, right? Obviously, everything we're fundamentally all agreeing everything is limited to human capability. Your argument is that they're not even trying to reach the intended conclusion of the Constitution, that they're just being political. I'm saying they are, and if they are, that makes them better than living constitutionalists, which means that your system is not.
But I don't
good.
care about living constitutionalists. I don't know why you keep bringing that up, right?
Because
so anyway,
your
so
plan
like, we can understand that originalists, two
implies
originalists
that
can
living
disagree.
constitutionalists is
They can look
equal
at a
to
law and
originalists.
disagree, right? Unless you guys think this is like some sort of
Here's a good analogy. I got an analogy maybe that can help explain this. You agree that two police officers who are tasked with enforcing the law, if both of them might be trying to enforce the law, but they might enforce the law differently, even though they both have the intention of enforcing the law as it is written. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, but they don't do rulings; they do enforcement, which
Right,
is
right,
like,
right.
fundamentally different.
Well, hold on, but this is important though. This is a good analogy because you have two cops. They both believe in enforcing the law as written, right? Because they accept, the process has created these laws. It is my job to enforce them, and I'm enforcing them. So you have two people who both believe that. They can come to different outcomes. But then you have this third cop who says, I don't care what the law was as it was written. The law was written by white racists. So actually, I'm going to impose what I think is the law as a cop. Would you be comfortable with that cop?
Sure, hon. But okay, sorry. I want to be very clear, right? So, like, Jeb asked me to come up like the originals case previously, but I don't have that, one, because I'm not a legal expert, fair enough, and two, because that's not what this debate was about, right? Wick asked me when he had to do this debate. He says, "Hey, Monday, we're going to talk about Supreme Court, and we should pass, abolish it, etc. Want in? That's it." So I didn't come here to argue about originalism and the system that I put forth, right, for diluting the power of the justices doesn't rely on that. You guys seem to think this is the case, but it's not. All right.
I didn't say that. Your proposal your proposal comes out of left field. Like I honestly don't like as long as like the ratios remain the same. I don't know what could happen.
I don't know. Yeah. So like these ratios, like I guarantee you no ratios, because it's like, whatever that Congress at that time.
When does the expansion of justices happen then? When are you
the expansion of justice? Well, when I become king, I don't know. When we pass, I don't know what to talk about. Like, when they pass the Constitution.
No. That's not what I'm asking. What I'm asking is like when there's a Democrat president. Is that the idea?
Oh, okay. I see. No, that's fair. Then we could stage it, right? We could stage it like it would have to be over like the next few presidential cycles, to ramp it up. But that's a good point. That's a really good point. But in any case, yeah. So like my system doesn't rely on that. All it does is dilute the power of the court, right? Like if like it is a political crisis, and I think you guys would agree, hopefully you would agree, that it's a political crisis every time a Supreme Court justice dies, right? Everyone rants up. We have to get one of our guys in, right? Or we don't have the president that we need. And so it's an utter disaster. It's the end of the world. I want to avoid all that, right? Like we can still have a court that has a judicial review. We can still have a court that plays this function within our society, but simply that like we have a great many people involved, and so it's like more randomized. Like you wouldn't bring a case to the court just because you think that this court's going to rule for me, right? Like it wouldn't be a conservative group, right, that would pick like a bullshit web designer out of bumfuck nowhere and then pushes their case up to the court because they know they have a conservative majority there. Or originalists, whatever, that are going to ruin their favor, whatever.
And that case is not bullshit.
But they can still present that case, but there's no guarantee who you're going to get, right? But if they are presenting a good enough legal argument, then this should succeed.
Okay, I want to give space to Omni a little bit. I know he's been raising his hand a couple times and he put himself in the queue. So here you are, buddy. Your time to shine.
Alrighty. No, so I just had a question for 𝕾𝖏 about something you said earlier. So I don't remember exactly what it was that you said, but basically you said earlier that like I think that this particular oh shit, hold on, my alarm. This particular court like isn't very very political at all, right?
Yeah, it's less political than prior courts.
Oh, okay. So you weren't saying that like the Supreme Court in general isn't political, but just this particular one.
Yes. So this current Supreme Court, every court is somewhat political. I agree. It's difficult to like it's a poison. It's difficult, like in the same way police officers are influenced by politics, right? But the goal is to like no, that's not their purpose, right? We want a court that is as like least partisan as possible. We want them to be just deciding things upon like a legal framework and an actual process, like a legal way of analyzing things, as opposed to I want to be on the right side of history kind of thing.
Okay. All right. Well, all right. That wasn't the answer I expected, I guess. But I'll just make something. I'll just make something else of it. So, like, I don't. To anybody, is there anybody on the panel then that thinks that like the Supreme Court isn't meant to be political at all, or that it hasn't been, or that isn't?
Well, those are two
Or-
different questions. I believe that it's meant to be as non-political as possible. I don't believe it ever has been non-political completely. We think this court's one of the best, with the stated intention that, yes, it shouldn't be political, and so you should always be striving for the least political one. Yeah.
Okay.
There's a lot of things in the United States that are supposed to be, or that aren't supposed to be as partisan as they are. I mean, the founding fathers despised political parties, and I mean, look at us now, or at least John Adams did. I'm sure I think some of the others did as well.
Then they founded them. No, politics is inevitable. You should design institutions that incorporate them. It's that simple.
Well, okay, but all right. I'll just.
What about
just say one more,
policing?
let me just say one more. Can I just say one more thing about that, and then we can move on? So, like, yeah, I in my studying of this topic before this debate, like, I found out apparently, like, most other countries, like with Supreme Courts, look at ours, and like they're like baffled by like how high profile that our Supreme Court is, like how political and partisan that it is. Like it seems like every fucking election year where there is a justice on, able to be nominated by one part or the other, it's like a massive fucking Armageddon. Oh my fucking god, the sky is falling, guys. And like most other countries just see this, and apparently they're just like, what the fuck is happening over there? Because theirs just don't function like that.
If I may, posit a reason real quick, it's because a lot of our rights are based on judicial review, and any time that they are threatened to be overturned, right, or any time that the makeup of the court changes, there is a threat that some of those fundamental linchpin rights that we have will be overturned. And this is why people are mad at the Democrats for not putting Roe v. Wade into law and instead relying on the judicial review court precedents to keep this.
I have a question about that, and maybe 𝕾𝖏 can help me answer. I really don't know. Like, what difference would it have made? Like, if they had... well, I think I know what your answer is going to be now that I think about it. But like I know what your answer is going to be.
Give me an opportunity to answer them.
Yeah. Fair enough. Sorry. So the people are mad at Democrats for not making it into a law, but instead relying on a ruling. But if Supreme Court was going to get rid of the abortion any which way, then it wouldn't have mattered if it was a law or a ruling. They could have overturned it. But I think I know what your answer is.
Yeah, which is that the Supreme Court went along like a principled legal framework and did not rule out states from like passing legislation on this. They just said it's not like a protected right. Look, Roe v. Wade was and Casey.
But if they said like it was the right to privacy, like if like
which they did, what those two cases did.
Good, no. Right? Yeah, but like, what if the rule in a proposed law that was passed, and says a woman has a right to privacy, and so it should be protected, right? Like her access to abortion should be protected. Then they could strike it down along those lines too, correct?
No. So the Supreme Court found erroneously in Roe v. Wade and Casey that the right to privacy here for abortion was like found within the penumbra of a number of amendments, primarily the 14th. Right, that's what they were looking at, and it was a constitutional question: is it like if a state wants to ban abortion, can they constitutionally? And Roe v. Wade said no, and Casey said no. Right, but then Dobbs came along and said, what it said, what Ginsburg has said, what plenty of Democratic politicians have all repeated, which is Roe v. Wade is a terribly ruled case. It's very little legal framework. There's no actual method to it. It just pulls shit out of its ass, and it was struck down. Like it was removed. And so and Dobbs was like, no, like you are free to pass laws protecting abortion, right? That's not the question. The question is, does the Constitution prevent states from outlawing it? And that's the Constitution does not prevent states from outlawing it.
So I'll say quickly. I wasn't asked this, but I'll just state it. And I've said it before with you on other panels, as that I think that Roe v. Wade was a bad idea in and of itself, and that this needed to be a decision fought out within the states, like how gay rights was being fought out. That we actually need to convince people, and then pass laws within those states. So. That out there.
That's happening now.
Yeah, and it's one of the concerns too with the big giant rotating pool of justices, right? And why I say if you want to have that, you can't have judicial review in the Supreme Court, because while it doesn't incentivize strategically timing when your case hits the Supreme Court, it actually does incentivize bloating the Supreme Court with a shitload of cases. Because all you would have to do is keep running cases based on, say, Roe v. Wade over and over every year, and just hope that you get a dice roll on 6 justices or 9 justices that are going to rule the way that you want and win your case because they have judicial review and the right to overturn what the previous Supreme Court argued.
But like you can just keep running cases now. You can just
but you
do
have
that.
the
But the
same
Supreme Court decides.
time.
Yeah. But even then, right? The Supreme Court decides what cases they're going to take. So that would still be the case, right? Like they could say, "Hey, we've already ruled on this, and so we're not going to." Like,
but if you get 9 conservative justices, they might want to rule it so they can overturn it.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter because,
why not?
It's still within our system. When a justice dies or leaves, we still have that issue where okay, now we're going to run it up the flagpole and see what happens.
But that right is
just
served a lot longer, right? In our system.
But I don't think that doesn't matter because once again the Supreme Court can just decide what cases and it wouldn't even have to be the same so a case is going to the Supreme Court. They're going to decide on that. A random judge can decide if they're going to take the case, right? And then a different group of people can actually rule on the case if they do take it.
Okay.
Sure. But I can just keep running it until I get the right.
But whatever. It's not like concern.
Okay.
Like they can just keep running cases if they want to spend their money. I don't even. Sorry, I'm just going to say one thing and I'm done. Like if they want to spend their money running cases up the flagpole, go ahead. Like it doesn't make a difference. Like it just matters if the Supreme Court changes it or not. And if it's a good ruling.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is it makes a huge difference because with the current court
you guys
system,
aren't going to convince each other. Like this is just an impasse at this point. And I do have another question. A lot of you have opinions on the recent website developer case, right? Some of you are saying it was a terrible case, should never have been heard. Others saying it was quite clearly the right answer, the right ruling, etc. If you all want, for the next 20 minutes or so, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. Just because I have some strong opinions, and I'm wondering if maybe some of you will change my mind here. I don't know. I'm not a legal expert, Scott.
You're gonna have to tell me about that one because I don't know.
I have a question about that. 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙, are you a lawyer or an attorney? Or I recall hearing something. Okay. So you're going to be able to answer this question for me then. And you have seemed, at least in matters of law stuff, fairly or surprisingly unbiased. I've heard you on other panels, and but is it true that you cannot litigate hypothetical scenarios?
Generally not, but there's exceptions, and the one here is the media case where the conflict was about a law that hadn't quite yet been enforced yet, but she was afraid that it would be applied to her. And generally, there's an exception for if a criminal law is going to apply to you, you can challenge it beforehand because otherwise, do we really want somebody to test that with their freedom, right? Because if they're wrong and they never would have broken the law to begin with, then now they're in prison. So we have some exceptions, but generally speaking, no.
Is that law Okay, I assume you're talking about the web designer case now.
Yes.
Because that's what I was getting at. Because that's what other people have said, was that like this case is bullshit because that the like she never even got like a gay couple to come to her. And like in the case of like the gay cake baker, for example, or the case with like the gay couple that wanted like a cake made for their wedding, that was different because that guy, I believe, actually did have a gay couple come
Yes,
to
he
him
did.
and what, yeah, which is, but in this case, it wasn't even like she didn't actually, it wasn't like an actual client, and they didn't, I guess, do the I don't know. It honestly, like, you might disagree with that, but based on what I read, it seems pretty disputed, especially since it was the Alliance Defending Freedom that was like running the thing, and it's weird that they didn't find anything about that. But like,
What was so to answer? This is actually like this. What like in the court opinion, like this was a topic that was grappled with and addressed, right? Because there is the concern here, like she technically like this is somewhat of a hypothetical in that like it's not like the law was coming after her at the time that she's like filing this lawsuit against Colorado, but what the court decided was, look, when it comes to like these kind of criminal aspects, we don't want somebody to like have to wait to challenge a quote unquote unjust law potentially to the point where like their freedom is in jeopardy, right?
Would her freedom have actually been in jeopardy?
Yeah, it was a Colorado law.
I know, but like there are some laws where like it opens you up to being sued, and then there are other laws where you go to jail if you violate it, right?
I don't know. I don't know what the actual penalties were, but like they were sufficient enough for the court to be like, we should hear this before it gets enforced.
I am curious what everyone else thinks here on this law, and I just will go around bad decision or good decision. Do you agree with the decision or you disagree? And then we can argue about why. We're going to start with 𝕵𝖎𝖙. Agree? Just
All right, which
real quick,
decision?
agree or disagree about
the web designer
developers.
case.
Mm-hmm.
303 Creative versus Ellen.
If you don't know, you don't know. I'm sorry.
I think it's indisputably a good ruling.
Good ruling.
I think if
got you. That's all we need for now.
Okay,
Linda, good ruling, bad ruling.
I guess under the law, it makes sense to me as they read it, but I disagree with it on a moral level because I don't like that.
Okay, 𝕵𝖏𝖏.
I love it on both a legal and moral level. It's perfect. Thanks.
SDL.
Don't care about the law. It's immoral.
Don't care about the law. It's an immoral thing, regardless of the legality. Got you. Prime.
I'm honestly torn on it.
Fair enough. And Omni, you said you were unfamiliar.
Well, yeah, no, I remember that you were more specific about like but I don't know enough about the case still.
Okay.
Okay, can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I want to clarify what this ruling is, because the media has pushed the thing. This isn't a ruling saying you can deny business to gay people because they're gay. This is a thing that you cannot be compelled to create original artwork representing an idea that you don't agree with. So a Nazi can't come into your paint shop that you've sold paintings to other people for and force you to paint a portrait of Hitler with a swastika armband on him.
Right.
Do you agree?
And you also can't force panelists to give opinions that they don't actually believe in as well, right? Like
I do that all the time. I'll never stop.
I'm just saying, like if you didn't agree with this ruling, then like that opens the door to like, well, like does somebody have to like censor their opinion because they're paid to give a speech?
Yeah.
Well, why do you think it's immoral? So, 𝕵𝖏𝖏 and 𝕵𝖎𝖏 are jumping for joy at this. Why do you think it's immoral, Stockton?
Well, wait, hold on. Since I still don't know much about this, could you just give the spark notes on
okay, real quick, TLDR. A woman, Colorado passed a law you cannot discriminate, basically. It's a freedom of speech law. And this woman thought that because of the way the law was worded, that if a gay couple asked her to make a website saying about their wedding, about their gay wedding, she would have felt forced to do it. She did not want to feel forced to do it, so she sued and brought
okay, yeah, all right. I don't give a shit. Honestly, I don't give a shit then, because to me, it's like find another fucking web designer. Then, like, I don't care much.
That's kind of like in some ways how I feel about. Like, I am also torn about because of the freedom of expression. But I do want to ask another question, kind of test where we're coming from here. Let's say instead of her being her sincerely held religious belief wasn't against gay people. Let's say it was against interracial couples. Would you still say that it would be okay for her to deny service to one black person and one white person who wanted to get married?
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah. Not because they're interracial, but because she doesn't want to create original artwork.
Stockton, I want you to, because looks like you're standing on your own. You're on a hill, like, and I'm curious. what's your argument here for why this is immoral?
I mean, I still think that would probably be immoral, but go ahead, Sucked.
Fair enough.
The argument is about public accommodations. So both this case and Masterpiece Cake Shop, which both are in the same vein of trying to expand religious freedom against same-sex couples, are both making the argument that works that involve art, you can choose not to engage in them. But that is a vast array of products. You could argue that any product which involves any artistic display whatsoever could fall under these rulings. Neither of these rulings gave any limits. Neither of them set up a test. Neither of them set up any fucking constitutional test. So I think this is a deeply immoral law. I do think there's some needle to thread on how do you balance making sure that everyone can get access to products, even ones that have some degree of creative involvement, and also that you don't want to force people to be painting swastikas or whatever, right? There's some needle to thread there, but they didn't fucking thread it. They just said this is a thing that is bad, and fucking moved on. It's a shit court case in that it doesn't solve any of the freedom problems that we're having. It both hurts same-sex couples and doesn't clearly define the boundaries of freedom of speech.
A question for Lactoid. A question for you, Lactoid, so you can respond to him as you this, and this is for 𝕵𝖎𝖙 too. And this was said in my chat. Principles Before Politics brings this up, and it's a good question. The larger question is whether it's okay to create a business that, by definition, will never serve a protected class. So you make your website or you create a business that, because of the beliefs of you, the proprietor, you will never serve a black person. You just never will. You will never design them a website promoting blackness or anything that they promote because you, for whatever reason, are racist and don't like black people. Is that okay to do?
Yeah, hold on. So to answer, I think so, right? Because this case is brilliant in the fact that it does somewhat thread the line here. It says that you do have to provide service to anybody, right? That's a protected class, but you can never be compelled to make a specific product that you otherwise wouldn't make. So in the same way the Jewish baker doesn't have to bake a swastika cake, the Jewish baker also doesn't have to create a website for a Christian couple because that goes against their religion, right? No, you're not going to force a Christian to make a Islamic website for an Islamic wedding, or force people to really anything you can think of, right? The idea is nobody should be forced to express themselves against their principles. That's totalitarian Orwellian shit.
I understand what y'all are saying, but I feel like the example of the swastika thing is kind of I don't think that's the same, because Nazism is a political opinion and being gay is an immutable characteristic.
Well, it's also Hindu though. It could be Hindu as well, right? So if you say the swastika is a Hindu thing, it's not actually because I'm a Nazi. If a Jew is I don't want to make a swastika regardless of your motivation, good for them. They shouldn't have to.
But that's not. I mean,
Hindu is a religion and protected class.
Yeah, Hindu is a religion, but I feel like that's more of an edge case, and you might be able to make I'm just saying that I don't think that the
Islam Christians shouldn't have to paint Islamic paintings either, but that's not an edge case. It's a very popular religion.
Yeah, well, no, honestly, okay, let me ask you a question then, because this gets into something else. If this lady, I feel like it would have been, at least in my book, maybe a little bit more okay if this lady had said, I am a Christian web designer and I want to make websites for Christian weddings, as opposed to websites for only straight couples, even if they're not Christian.
It's fine. I mean,
if her Christianity is, because if she's doing it based on that, and if she's catering particularly to just Christians, I feel like that's a little bit more okay than just I just am going to exclude gay people because
it's because of her Christian faith, though. It's motivated because of her Christian faith.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, but why is she okay with secular weddings then at all? Why not just make it be Christian weddings?
I mean, she might think that marriage is a fundamentally religious institution, as one of the sacraments, and so getting secular people to participate in one of the religious sacraments might be making them more religious. So she's down for that.
What if it's an Islamic wedding, or a wedding for some other? What if it's
I would bet she probably would.
Weird as fuck religion.
She probably wouldn't want to marry them. She probably would create a website. Yeah,
and she probably should. So I want to get to Wick's question. Should you ever be able to build a business with the stated intent of denying service to someone of a protected class,
or even that just because of the identity of the business, it will necessarily exclude a protected class?
And I would say some of our favorite businesses do that, and some of our favorite nonprofits do that, because what people don't understand is Black, Latino, and Asian are not the protected class. Race is the protected status. And when you're talking about disability as a protected status, both disabled people and non-disabled people. So any business that fundamentally is for producing products only for disabled people is fundamentally built to discriminate against a protected class, because even the status of not being disabled is a protected status, because it is your disability status that is protected. So if you build a business based on providing opportunities for Black Americans, you are fundamentally creating a business that discriminates based on a protected status, even if it's a nonprofit, and we do that all the time. And we love it. It's a great thing to do.
What do you think of this, Sock and Prime? What are your thoughts here?
Do you want to go first?
They're
Prime?
kind of hogging the mic.
Hold on, I have a question.
Well,
the disability,
before-
disability example. Can I ask something about that? I feel like that's a really dumb example.
Get concisely, but then I want to get Prime and Sock in here.
If someone opens a store that's selling stuff for disabled people, it doesn't mean that I'm not allowed to walk in there and buy one of those things. It's not like they're saying, we only serve disabled people here, and if you're not disabled, then you can get the fuck out.
A lot of nonprofits
show me your card
to disabled people, and a lot of Navy Federal Credit Union will only allow veterans, which is another protected status. Veterans and their families, they will only allow them to go there.
Well, let me ask this.
That's a quirk of the Federal Credit Union law. You can't be a credit union and also serve the entire public. That's just
a real quick. Do you have a problem, Kalinda, right? With a wheelchair company requiring that the people that they make and design custom wheelchairs for to actually be disabled and need the wheelchair?
I mean,
if I, as someone who doesn't need a wheelchair, I have no need for a wheelchair right now. If I said, hey, I want you to design me a custom wheelchair, should they be able to tell me, no, you're not disabled, you don't need it, we don't want to spend our time servicing you, we only design for people who are disabled? Do you think that they should be able to?
If it's a custom wheelchair and like their stated purpose as a company is, then I mean, no, I wouldn't have a problem with that.
Then
I don't really think.
Then the question is, why do you have a problem with someone whose stated goal is to build websites for what they believe to be Christian marriages are, from denying a service to someone they don't believe is a Christian marriage?
Well, because she wasn't just building websites for things for Christian marriages.
Conceptually, work with me here. Maybe
I understand what you're saying, but you probably should have substituted Christian with straight.
Whatever. Right?
On this particular case, in the case of the website thing, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. Although I kind of have a problem with it if it is if it's in like like if you're in a small town and you want a cake baked for your wedding, and there's only one cake baking shop in town, and that cake baker is like, fuck you, I'm not going to serve gay people because I don't believe in same-sex marriage, then at that point I think that you start to run into problems. And there are scenarios, so like pragmatically, I'm not, yeah.
What if instead of cakes, it was there's no.
I know, but we gotta get more.
No,
people
I'm
in
curious
here.
as to what Lactoid's gonna say.
I understand.
Now.
It's very pertinent, but okay.
Okay, pertinent. Come on, let's go. Pertinent.
Okay,
pertinent,
so
boys.
what if instead of cakes, it was like there's somebody like to officiate or like give a speech at the wedding, and there was nobody in the town who would like give a speech at the wedding, like praising interracial couples. Would you want to make somebody like come and give a speech like approving of something that they don't believe in?
That seems like an odd scenario.
It's just as equally likely as nobody in the town will bake a cake.
I mean, there are pretty small towns in the United States, my friend.
Okay,
Although I suppose now the world is so small that you can.
Well, so the point of public accommodations grows stronger the closer a good is to being like really, really essential. The reason that these arguments always come out with shit like marriage is because fundamentally marriage ceremonies are completely unnecessary. But when it comes to stuff like, say, disability access, that's a really poor example because like it's often necessary to disabled people's lives. Like the average disabled person makes fucking shit money, often like on SSI, Medicare, Medicaid. And so a lot of companies that make goods for disabled people are either making really high-end stuff for rich disabled people or making shit for like almost free and getting like state loans to do so. So that's just like not a good example because like those firms are so cash strapped they have to discriminate.
And it's a good example.
That's not true of like race or sex.
It's a good example because he asked if there is an instance where it is normal, and I said yes. And you further made my argument for me by saying our federal credit union code forces federal credit unions to discriminate, which means we find it so moral to discriminate based on protected classes that we have it codified into our federal credit union code.
Yeah, but that's bad. The credit union thing is bad. It's just a fuck over credit unions at the end.
No, it's a good thing. It provides a lot of.
What is the benefit of having a veterans credit union and also a non-veterans credit union?
The veterans credit union often provides like extremely advantageous terms to people who served our country.
Okay, as opposed to the other credit unions, like on average,
Yes.
credit unions all provide.
No, not true. Schools first for teachers, Navy Federal, they are known, and I was in the finance industry for quite a while. They are known for giving the best terms, and they are only available to educators, veterans, and their families.
And what's the benefit of that to like society? Because the whole point of this
Because
is
it incentivizes people to be members of the military and to be educators, which are what we find to be very virtuous and society-driven.
I feel like you could do that without
who's
fucking up the
Speak for
credit union
yourself.
structure. Yeah,
I mean,
feel like
we as a country
Well,
have decided that
credit
those are
unions.
protected classes.
We can debate on credit unions another day. I'm curious Prime's take here.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear all the takes that Jeb and Lactoid made. Could you someone give me a TLDR? So
Basically, for example, well, you know Lactoid's take on this. He thinks
terrible
that
take. Got
discrimination is okay. They can a person, if the person doesn't want to serve a black person, doesn't want to write a sign that says Black Lives Matter and support black businesses and things, they should be able to turn away anyone who wants that. What are your takes?
Better than his. No, I think that on an individual level, it's difficult to force an individual to do things, but like I think on an organizational level, you can't force organizations. So if there is an organization, let's say a diner, that doesn't provide to the public at large, then we can shut that diner down, right? Those individuals can still go on and be free to not serve Black people in their individual capacity. But an organization, I think, should. And I think discrimination is fine if it leads to equitable outcomes. So you can discriminate and say that this group of people, right, define however that group of people has had historical disadvantages. And so we are going to give them an advantage in the present so that,
Sure.
to
Let
make
me ask a direct question. Let me ask this real
you
quick.
just
Stop.
said
I want to ask a
outcomes.
direct question, right?
Yeah, equitable outcomes. Yeah, to even things out. I don't
real
know.
quick.
I hope that
If Amazon or a large
even things out.
Okay,
Yeah,
a large
go ahead.
company. Let's we're talking organizational level here. So we have a large company, a large flag maker organization, right? They make flags of all kinds, custom flags, all kinds of flags you can say. But the owner of the corporation is gender critical. They don't believe that trans people exist or trans people should exist. And they are saying, I am not going to make or sell a pride flag. Do you think that counts as discrimination? And do you think that they should be compelled by the government and to make and provide that as a service? And I'm curious what your take is as well, Sockdom.
Should they be compelled to make an individual
not
design?
even to have the trans flag, right? The trans flag or the pride flag with the trans symbol in it, right?
Yeah, I hear you.
Should they be they're large, again, they're a large Amazon-like entity, right? With who makes most of the flags. Should they be compelled to make or offer that as a option? Why or why not?
I'm not sure. Like, I would compel someone to make a individual design. I would compel them to service members of the public. So, like, yeah, like, but they may not provide a a specific. I don't know if that like practically works. If I would make them like, this is the specific design that you must have, like by order of the government, like print this type of flag. It's like if gay individuals are ordering flags and they don't want to give flags to gay individuals, that would be the problem for me. So I guess I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I
But
think
he
that's
agrees with the Supreme Court in this decision.
That's why I said
okay,
that's why
yeah.
that's why I
That's
said I
what
was
says
torn. I
torn,
didn't
yeah.
fight that one.
Yeah,
That's why I was torn.
I've been sort of torn on this as well. Although I do want to ask another question. I
Well,
guess
I
because-
want to get 𝖭┐𝖓's answer before you do. I want to get
Okay.
𖭭▐▓'s answer. And
Oh, I gotta go.
Chapter.
Sorry, I gotta
Oh.
go.
Oh, Brian.
I also have to go.
Oh, I forgot
yeah.
that it.
Thank
Oh
you for being
my
here,
God,
Lactoid.
the time sure flies. So, gang, I am curious what your answer is, 𝖭▐𖓐, but after they go, I'm gonna give them a brief outro and let them go. So, Prime, have your outro and get out of here.
Yeah. Shout out to my man, Wick, who I love a lot. Thank you for including me. This has been great. And to everyone here, right, including 𝕵𝖎𝖙, I give this guy a lot of shit, but like, he fights back very well. And he has great points. And, dealing with him is very challenging. So I love it, right? So shout out to everyone here who participated. I'm going to go start up my own stream, right? And we'll
We'll
actually be
soon.
live in. Yeah, we'll be live in a second, but then we'll actually start in like 5 minutes from now. So if you like, you can come and join us. We'll have our friend 𝖭𝖏𝑡𝑤𝑖t there as well. We'll be talking about is America too dangerous? That should other countries ban the citizens from coming to our country? And we'll also be talking about the Supreme Court. So come check us out if you will. And I'll say one last thing. Twitch.tv/PrimeKai or YouTube.com/PrimeKai, PrimeCeys, if you want to come and join us. And last thing is, okay, I'll admit I got paid to say this, but I actually do believe this. Is that you should go check out 𝖭𝖏𝑡𝑤𝑖t's server, and because 𝖭𝖏𝑡𝑤𝑖t's a great guy, and which I believe, and you should have different opinions, which is why I have them like every week on my panel, and it's better for you to have a mix of political influences. So shout out to the person who gave me a donation to say that. But again, I actually do believe it. 𝖭𝖏𝑡𝑤𝑖t's amazing. All right, I gotta go. Bye.
Okay,
Bye,
bye.
Prime.
Okay, and 𝖭𝑡𝑤𝑖t, really quick.
Just to clarify, I didn't pay him and I didn't ask anybody to pay him, just to be clear. But yeah, if you
How
like my
much?
takes, I didn't, I promise. If you like my takes, you can find me at 𝖭𝖏𝑡𝑤𝑖t on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. The last thing I'll say is SDL, I've known you for a very long time. What I expect is a apology on Twitter for your statement when you said abolish the court. This whole time you've not talked about abolishing the court. You talked about how we need a court. I want you to make a tweet saying 𝖭𝖏𝑡𝑤𝑖t was right. We should not abolish the court. So I'm looking forward to
Are
that.
you going to compel him to
I'm not going to compel him, but I'm expecting it. So I appreciate all of your time.
So-called consent maximizer wants to compel my speech.
It
Yikes.
looks like. Okay, I do know that we have to go and we're going to raid out into Prime Kai, but I want to ask 𝖭𝖏𝖓 the question, like I've been trying to ask, right? Like, what do you think on that? Should a flag maker or other institution or organization, not institution, a business, a private business, be compelled to offer a trans pride flag?
So the argument that I've tried to present is there's a spectrum of goods. There are goods which are completely service with no artistic element. So imagine something like giving someone a loaf of bread. In that case, discrimination is very obvious. If you refuse to sell it to like a queer customer, that's obvious discrimination. Then you, on the other end of the spectrum, you have something like an individual work of art that you put creative talent into. And I'm not sure. Like, that's the one where I have questions. But in between there's stuff like making a website. And 99.9% of work of making a website is rote. It's exactly the same for any customer. The idea that having to put on like, hey, it's Ryan and Jim's website is some deeply offensive message, I think is unacceptable. So I think that you need like a dual test. It first needs to be a very strong artistic expression, or at least a fairly strong artistic expression. And two, it needs to be a fairly strong message. So that like it would be sufficiently objectionable. And I do also want to note that as far as I'm aware, there have been no examples of compelled speech under anti-discrimination laws to date in U.S. history. Like, no one has brought suit, except maybe the Master that one cake shop. And in that one, they didn't even fucking rule on the general question of what to do with all this. Oh my fucking God.
This kitty.
Oh, he's adorable.
So I guess the point is just like, this is an extremely rare thing to worry about. Like, are we super worried about the compulsion of speech, or are we worried more about the message that it sends to businesses that, hey, maybe you can get away with a little bit of discrimination if you're really religious about it? And so that's kind of my concern. Yeah.
No, it's good. Okay, $20 from Lawson Harrison to Assis. And this will be the last question of the night before we wrap up and give you all outros. If we get rid of all discrimination laws around businesses providing services, not government agency services, but private businesses, what percentage of businesses do we think would throw up the no blacks/gays/trans, etc. sign? Do we think that they would choose to discriminate?
Oh, it's the libertarian argument. Get rid of all the anti-discrimination laws because, I mean, I think it depends. I think it depends on
Yeah,
where
it depends
they
on the
are.
area of the country. Yeah, like it depends on a lot of things.
In red
Like,
states,
I
if
don't know
think
if it's that argument, though. I think it's just a question because obviously there's a second question to if we should remove them off the books, right? Because if everybody stopped murdering people tomorrow, we wouldn't take murder off the books as a
Yeah.
crime. So I think you can answer this question honestly and still come to the conclusion that some anti-discrimination laws should stay.
Because some rural town in fucking Mississippi, yeah, I'm willing to bet that there would probably
Yeah.
be, or in some of those sundown towns that people talk about, yeah, there would absolutely be cafes there that would throw up whites only signs.
Well, there's
Yeah,
a
and I
real-
don't think it would be white. I think right now, obviously, what most people are concerned about is there'd probably be a decent amount, probably like still less than 1%, but a good chunk of businesses would probably put up no trans.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely, that is
black might
true.
not
Yeah.
necessarily be the
I mean,
fighting
that's
ground
already
anymore.
that's already
but-
basically happening. They're not saying no trans, but you have all of the anti-woke products that are explicitly modeled on like hating an XYZ identity. So I don't think it would be one step too hard to have that website be like, also we don't sell to trans customers.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is like I'm sure that would probably be the more modern way to argue it because I think still again I think less than 1% of businesses in general just period because again there's the profit motive and profit is generally king and so but there are certain verticals where rejecting trans people might actually increase your profitability. So you've got to think of those circumstances. And so we should still have some anti-discrimination laws on the books, which is what we have now, which is if the product is generally the same every time, you can't just not sell it to certain people
Gotcha.
because of a protected identity.
Okay, gang, it's been a blast. We've gone over time, but it's been a robust discussion. I've really enjoyed it. What we got coming up tomorrow, we're going to have an interesting stream. I will be doing something probably around 7, just briefly. But then we're going on Tomfoolery's show at 9. We will be broadcasting. You can watch it live here if you'd like, or on my YouTube channel. And we will be talking with Destiny, with Smith, with Tomfoolery himself, and a few others, Kidology, and we're going to be talking about incels, sex work, and fulfilling relationships. Apparently, I'm expert at all three enough to be invited. I appreciate the invite. I have opinions, and so you get to see non-moderator Wick, and that'll be fun, won't it, gang? Okay, I want to give all these people an outro, and we're going to start with Socked on Left. Go ahead.
Thanks for having me on Wick. I'm Socked on Left. You can find me on Twitter and YouTube. I'm trying to stream every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Not today because pretty sick, doesn't show up, but really fucking tired. But happy to come on. Thank you for hosting. I know keeping some of their restraint on is pretty hard. I know what's it like. Prime's way more fucking energized when he gets to argue his side than having to play good both sides. So thank you for doing that. I know it's a lot of work. Thank you for getting people together.
Oh, thank you for being here. I hope you feel better. I really do. Appreciate your opinions, even if in this case I don't think we see eye to eye on this one, but it's okay. I like the Supreme Court mostly. Jebtan, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't really do much streaming, but you can find me on Twitter at Jebtan_RIP.
Jebtan RIP. Check him out, gang. Thanks for being energetic. Thanks for shilling your side. I really appreciate you. Kalinda, go ahead.
You can find me on Twitch, Kick, and YouTube at Kalinda, KALIINDA. On YouTube, it's at Kalinda with the @ symbol in front of it. I'm also on Twitter as well, but it's kind of a weird name, and it's linked on one of those other profiles. I am streaming right now. If anybody wants to come over on all of those platforms, I mean, only on Twitch. I would never violate the Twitch terms of service by multi-streaming.
Okay, thank you. Really appreciate you being here and appreciate your opinions. Last but certainly not least, Omnislap, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'd like to give a shout out and a thank you to Wick here for finally having somebody invite me to a panel that isn't about China or Russia or Ukraine. Been asking for it for a while. And I don't remember the last time, honestly. As it turns out, I can actually talk about different things, believe it or not. So this was cool, and I hope to do it again. So yeah, Omni_Slap1 on Twitch and Twitter. I'm still remain unconvinced that we shouldn't change the Supreme Court. But yeah, so that's where I'll leave it.
Okay, and with that, gang, we'll rate out. Say hi to Prime Kai. And yeah, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Probably 6, maybe 7. Bye.
All right.
Bye.
Okay.
Oh shit.
Oh, now they're all gone. Okay, we're gonna actually try to rate out on YouTube too. I think there's a way to do it. Edit the streams. Go to customization. Redirect, yes. Add a redirect. Search videos from other channels. Let's go to Prime Kai. Let's hope he's up. I don't know if he is. Oh, I need redirect privileges needed? Ask Prime. Well, sorry, Prime. You're not getting redirected there. Okay. See you guys later. Bye. And bye, Kick.